order. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the School District of Waukesha's Board of Education Teaching and Learning Committee for Tuesday, December 7th, 2021. We begin this evening on our agenda under general business. Stacy, has the meeting been properly posted?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Next tonight under general business, we have a Bright Lights presentation from our student council members from Butler Middle School. So I would ask Mr. Sadowski, principal at Butler, or someone else from the school to start us off here, and we'll go from there. So welcome to Teaching and Learning Committee meeting.
Hi everybody, thanks for inviting us. My name is Joey Kovneski and I am one of the Butler Student Council Advisors. I'm joined by Mrs. Kim Harrington, my co-advisor. And tonight with us we have 3 of our Butler Student Council Exec Board members who are going to update you on some of Butler's focuses for this year with our Student Council. So I will pass it off to them.
That one and this one.
Okay. Okay, Haley. It's right there. Oh, okay. Hi, we're from the Butler Student Council. My name is Haley, and this is Student Council. We are a group of 5 people. There is a president, vice president, 8th grade class rep, 6th grade class rep, and 7th grade class rep. I am the 8th grade class rep.
My name's Lindsay, and I'm the 7th grade class rep.
My name's Maddie. I'm the vice president.
And we are the exec board of student council, and they're basically, the exec board runs every meeting we have with the whole student council, and the whole student council is open to anyone at Butler. So some things that we focus on at our meetings are leadership. So we take about 5 minutes each meeting in the beginning to talk about leadership. Our big questions are, why do leadership skills matter? What are the qualities of a good leader? What kind of leader am I? So we just talk about these things, and this is from the Powerful Youth that we use from. And then, so this is some of the stuff that we also talk about at our leadership moments. One of the other things we work on as a Butler Student Council, we work on Butler service. It's like joining as a Butler community to provide community to our school and helping other kids feel welcome at our school and teachers. What we did for American Education Week, for November, we did November 15th through the 19th. We did on Monday we did Your Lightsaver, and it said thanks for all you do, and we had a lightsaver, and we gave it to we gave one to every single staff at our school. Then on Tuesday we did positive affirmations on vehicle windshields. So during our lunch time we went outside and put little notes on everyone's cars, and then on Wednesday, the entire exec board, the entire student council, not just us, we went outside and did chalk. And then we wrote thank you notes and inspirational stuff. And then on Thursday, we sent out an inspirational video to all of the teachers. And then lastly, on Friday, we did a student thank you video where we had students say stuff for the teachers. So one of our other activities, so we have Butler Activities, so this is just having fun as a Butler community. And one of our activities is movie night. So this Friday we'll have a movie night after school, and anybody is welcome to come from Butler.
and it's just something that we do to bring like us closer as a Butler community. So at Butler, we feel it's important to be united.
I think it just needs to be turned on, maybe.
So at Butler, we feel it's important to be united, and we want to come together and build a stronger school and a community. On October 20th, we had our Unity Day. We have a Unity Day every third Wednesday of the month. Butler students and staff are invited to wear orange to promote Unity Day. We wore orange to show that Butler as a community is united together. We had a spirit week, and on Monday it was a pajama day. On Tuesday it was a twin day. Wednesday it was a decade day. Thursday it was class color day. And Friday it was Butler Pride Day. Our next spirit week will be December 20th. So, after Thanksgiving break and the tragic things that happened, we wanted to have hope. And so we started these hope pillars. We cannot change the past, but we can hope for what tomorrow will bring. Hope transforms the most challenging moments like a caterpillar to a butterfly. Hope grows like a flower in the spring. We have taken some time to share what we hope for and or what gives us hope with our paws, flowers, and butterflies. The students would color these in and put them on our hope pillars to promote like hope for the entire school. These pillars are in the cafeteria so that everybody can see them. That's the end. Thank you for listening and having us here tonight.
I don't think you're quite done yet. Any questions or comments from committee members? Mr. Baumgart.
When you went through your presentation up here, we saw a lot of the activities that you have going on. And school councils have been available for years and years. I can guarantee that because many years ago I was there too. But one of the things I guess I wonder about, what's the big reason you have a student council? What's the big thing you're after with having a council like that?
I think it's really important for everyone to feel like they have a say in what happens after school activities, what things we can bring to their school. I think that it's really important for everyone to feel like they have a voice and they have that option. There's about 50 kids signed up for student council. That's just an estimate. And they all came because they wanted to have a say in the different things that we do. And then it's also really important that everyone feels united and they all feel welcome at our school.
You, as far as I know, you hit the nail on the head. You said so many times, everyone and united. That's really what you're trying to get. I mean, your other things that you're doing are very, very positive, and that's how you build the rest of it. But what we really want to see, and you are demonstrating it, is the whole group can come together as a community, and that's a very important word, very important right now, that we start thinking about the community. And I want to congratulate you for your work on that. Thank you.
Anything else? Ms. Roddy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your presentation and sharing that. I have a question. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Powerful Youth piece that you were referring to, either the council members or advisors?
So with the Powerful Youth, we really wanted to focus on kids our age and how they think, because like Haley said, it's really something that we want everybody to have a say in. So we kind of focus on like what they might need for the future, and like we have like a list of top job skills that you might need for later on in life. So we really wanted to focus on our leadership skills, kind of like inflicting a powerful and like open message to everybody so they can work on what they really need to, because we want everybody to be a successful leader.
Awesome.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership at Butler.
Anything else? Dr. Piazzi?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious, so all of you are either leaders of student council or class representatives, and you guys did an election to choose that. What motivated you to want to be a leader for your class or for all students at Butler?
I think that one of the big parts of why I wanted to join student council is because I wanted to make a difference in the Butler community. Because, like, kids' voices, it's really important that we're heard, because we have really great ideas from the things that we can do. So I think that I just wanted to make sure I had a voice in that and make sure that I was a part of like some of the decisions that we make at Butler for our service, our community, and our leadership.
So I speak not only for myself, but I know like everybody who really like tried out, their speech was all about like wanting to help Butler and make it better. So I really wanted to just kind of not change Butler too much, but make it a better version of what it already was. So
Nice.
it's really powerful to me that kids can get to share their voices, just because most times it's the grown-ups making the decisions.
I really wanted to be in Butler Student Council on the exec board because it was a way to share my voice and let others be heard. Because if someone comes with me with an idea, I always bring it to Ms. Harrington and Mr. K, Mr. Metacognition, so that they can like all think on the ideas and we can get everyone's voice heard. My big thing is I want everyone's voice to be heard.
Nice.
Well, thank you all for what you're doing. Your classmates are very lucky to have you step into these roles, so thank you.
Mr. Coleman?
First off, each of you are very articulate. Really a great presentation. And I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the efforts that you're making around hope, what the impact of focusing on hope has been for your Butler students. Or not your students, your peers, I mean. I'm sorry. I promoted you to teachers there. See, you guys are doing such a good job. I thought you were adults.
So hope can really, like, as long as you have something that kind of makes you fixated on something that is not fear, it's not anger, hope can really be anything as long as you have something that is like the light at the end of the dark tunnel. Because if you have something that you hope for, you have something that you wish for, and you work towards it, you're more likely to get that than if you're cowering in the shadows.
Awesome.
Yes. And have you seen a lot of hope in the last number of days?
We have seen a growing population of the hopeful, like, paws and the flowers and the butterflies. So people are really trying to make our pillars full. Soon we're going to run out of space.
Well, hope is very strong, and I'm glad that you're focusing on that. Who chose to focus on that? Was that voted on? How did you come up with that?
It was more the people in the office. It wasn't really us that chose that, but we really, because it was a thing that they chose, we really want to work on that because it's important. It's still important to us too, even though we weren't the ones to choose that. It was still very important to us that we have hope in hard times.
Yeah, to spread that, to really work on that. Excellent. Well, thank you for what you do, and thank you for your leadership and working hard at it. And I can tell you take it very seriously, and you're doing a wonderful job.
Just a couple of comments. First of all, I can tell just by the smile on your faces that it feels really good when adults listen to you. It feels good for us too when adults listen to us too. But I can really tell that it's really genuine, and you really do care about the work that you're doing at your school. And I heard things like, making sure everyone's voice is heard, having a positive impact, making a great school even better. All that that you're doing is making a huge difference, and you might not see it all the time, but many people behind the scenes are watching and seeing what you're doing at Butler School. So I want to thank your advisors for being behind the scenes and making sure that a group like you is, first of all, possible at your school. Some schools, I'm sure, don't have student council, so it does take advisors to come forward and spend a lot of time and energy with you. I love your focus on the leadership skills that you have. Those are life skills, and you're learning them now. And you're accomplishing great things at this age level. So super proud of you, and it looks like you're off to a great start to the year. Just one final thing. Could you tell me one thing that you think each of you, what's the biggest thing you think that you're different now because you're in student council because what? Because of student council, you're different because what?
I feel that student council has made me different and made me better by teaching me to listen to other people. Sometimes I don't always listen to other people, and I think that it should go my way, but I think that being in student council has made me better and made me want to listen to everyone, and like I said before, let everyone's voice be heard.
Great, thank you. So you're different because of student council? What way?
I think that for student council really changed me because of my leadership skills, because I always really liked being the leader, and this really helped me to grow as a leader, to listen to everybody, and to make sure that I can take charge when I need to, but then make sure that everyone else's voice is heard, because that's what a good leader is. So that's really helped me. Student council has.
Awesome. Student council has changed you in what way?
I feel like I'm able to understand more and have other people come to me more because they know that now I'm part of student council and they really want their ideas to be heard, so they come to me to try and have me talk to somebody to make their ideas actually a reality. So I feel like I have become more mature in that way, taking their ideas and kind of hoping to nourish them enough to create something out of them.
Wow. And just look how easily those came to your mind and you were able to communicate those to us. Student council's had an impact on you, I can tell. I want you to know that we're very proud of you. You're doing a great job. Keep up the good work and keep representing your school. It's making a difference. Thank you very much for your presentation tonight. We are moving on to portion of our meeting under general business where we have the opportunity for public comment. We have one speaker signed up this evening, so the time limit will be 5 minutes. We expect speakers, not only any speaker tonight or any time, to honor our time limits, to refrain from using any inappropriate language in any manner, and to be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. We also expect the audience to be respectful of the speaker and the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will distract from our meeting this evening. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience, and that the area behind the speaker and podium will be cleared during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phones at this time. Our one speaker that we have this evening, Samuel D'Amico. So, Samuel, if you could please come forward, and welcome.
Good evening. Well, tonight I'm here to speak because I and too many parents, teachers, and students are upset. Upset about the recent events at West and South High School. Upset about the inaction of the board and administration on these issues and the issues we have been coming to these meetings to speak about for 4 months. Every single day, students hear slurs and insults in the hallways. Every single day, students are harassed either online or during school, and frankly, looking at statistics doesn't help anyone. Students are uncomfortable, sometimes afraid to report these incidents. Sometimes student reports go nowhere, which just discourages students from ever reporting again. Sometimes these incidents happen online or off campus, and students feel they aren't able to make the school involved. Sometimes students don't feel they are able to report incidents to certain staff members. These are issues that numbers just don't tell you. I believe that the action taken by administration to cancel equity, diversity training, to remove signage from hallways is something that is not helping this precedent. I'd also like to say that no speaker has ever said that signs were the solution. It's not what anyone was trying to get across. What we are trying to say is that adding signs, or more or less keeping the signs that were in place for more than 2 decades, was a part of a solution that could have been added or made with new policy or implementing current policy more strongly. So the reason why that more parents, students, and teachers are getting involved about this now and in the past 4 months is because we just don't feel that the superintendent's work in this area helped the situation any better. Over, I think now, 5,000 people have signed a petition made by the Waukesha Alliance for Education. Probably nearly 200 people have come to this podium to speak about this issue in the past 4 months, and yet all that happened was, I think, 2 or 3 discussions by the board where not much happened. There was a consensus made by the board that this was a serious issue. I'm glad that's been aware. What we now want to see is change happen, more discussions happen that can lead us in the right direction, a direction in which a lot of us in our school district feel we're going the wrong direction, something that's not going to change unless something changed at the board level. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Anyone else this evening that wants to address the board? Okay. We are moving on to the action item section of our agenda. And the first action item is the approval of the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting minutes from Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. We have a motion for approval. Mr. Baumgart, thank you.
I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. Roddy. Any discussion, additions, corrections? Seeing none. All in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes Stacy 5-0. Our next action item this evening is the approval of Advanced Placement English 11, the language and composition textbook. And we have Rachel Herman, our Director of Secondary Learning, here this evening to present some of the past things that have happened in this journey of adopting this textbook. and also any next steps that are coming on the horizon. So welcome, Rachel. We look forward to your presentation, and I'm sure we'll have time for questions at the end, so thank you.
Sure. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me tonight. So we have come before you before, and again, we are seeking an adoption of the AP, sorry, I'm going to quick go to my presentation mode. Why can't I hit present?
Next to share.
It's not there. Okay. We're just not going to go in present mode. That's okay. So we have come before you before with an adoption for our AP 11 textbook. And so I'm really just going to recap a lot of what you've heard before in our past presentations. So again, the Advanced College Board revised that curriculum for the Advanced Composition course in 2020. The current textbook that we had been using for that course was from 2007, so it was incredibly outdated. And it really just didn't support the new revisions to the course, nor did it contain relevant topics or rigorous text that our students needed to prepare them for success on that advanced placement exam. And so over the course of the last year, our teachers have been piloting with this textbook. We have received incredibly positive feedback from both our students and the teachers around the textbook. And so at this point in time, we are seeking to, again, recommend the adoption of this book. In terms of the cost, again, this was reviewed with you, but it's a $46,000 purchase. That gets us 6 years of online access to the textbook, so most of our students are accessing this book digitally. However, it also gives us 35 hard copies for each of our sites, so that for students who, for whatever the reason, can't access the technology, right, iPad is broken, whatever the reason, right, we'll have hard copies. The cost also includes access for teacher resources, including testing banks and testing resources. So during one of our updates, we did talk about to write, for a teacher to try and write his or her own sample AP questions is incredibly difficult. We showed, if you remember, some of the sample AP test questions, and so the fact that this resource comes with those testing banks and that those banks have been curated by AP test authors is just an incredible resource. And then lastly, the cost would include professional development from the vendor themselves. They would come in and work with our teachers around how to best support the use and the implementation of the resource. So I don't have any new information around the pilot to share. Again, the teachers are continuing to use it with their students. Again, the feedback continues to be positive, and so there's nothing new that has come about that would cause us to change course at this point in time.
Questions or comments? Mr. Como?
I would move approval of the language of composition as presented.
I'll second.
And seconded by Dr. Piasek. Thank you. Any discussion, questions, comments? Mr. Baumgart?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this several times, and it's always come out very positive. And as I look over your little listing of some of the things here, it reminded me of the fact that we've had a huge number of students access to this material, all favorable.
Yes.
That's kind of like not usual.
Right, that's,
So,
yeah.
very easy for me to say this is a goal. Thank you, and I complimented the staff that's been working on this for some periods of time, so thank you.
Absolutely.
Dr. Piasek?
Just a couple of quick comments. First of all, thank you very much for the very thorough evaluation of this. Again, although not my favorite subject, I really love this book. And I've said this before, there are controversial topics in this book. I think the way that they're presented and the way that they're managed in this course is very appropriate. And I think for our 11th graders in particular, it's forcing discussion and thought-provoking on topics that they're ready for. So I think this is very well done. From a cost perspective, of course, I'm doing the math on that. You know, I think we've got couple hundred kids who are taking this class every year. We're talking about $40 per student really to have access to these resources along with the teachers and the additional test questions and all that. So I think it's economical, and I think, our students deserve something that's, a step forward from this stack here, which I did not read. But I like this one. So thank you for all the work that went into this.
Thank you.
Anything else? Rachel, I just want to thank you and your team for getting us to this point. It's been a long time for you. You've done your homework. You've gone back to the group. You've collaborated, cooperated.
The teachers put in an incredible, any of our AP teachers will tell you the integrity that they put into their work is just immense, and they are instrumental to all of this. They put in just the utmost work and thought and care into making sure that they're putting the best text in front of their kids. So
Yeah, so please make sure that message gets back to them from us,
Absolutely.
that we echo everything that you've just said.
Absolutely.
And it's just really an incredible process when it works the way it should. And I would say this would be an example of how it should be working. So,
Yep.
especially when you don't have, a lot of questions, at least at this point, you would hope not, but sometimes we have in the past. So, great job, great leadership. Thank you to your team. And I think I'm ready to vote. So,
Okay.
any further questions or comments? Okay. All in,
No,
okay, Ms. Pomper.
you were going to say something else.
No. So we're looking at approval of the Advanced Placement English 11 Language and Composition textbook. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes Stacy 5-0. Thank you, Rachel.
She's still there.
Yeah, she's going to stay here for a
I'm
while.
gonna stay up here for a
She's
little
going to stay here for a while. We're moving on to our discussion information items this evening, and our first one is the adoption of advanced placement math textbooks. We have Rachel Herman, once again here, our Director of Secondary Learning, and Dan Paczynski, Math Instructional Coach in the district, and we have one more presenter. If they could introduce themselves, that would be great, and we'll turn it over, and we look forward to your presentation.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Fontaine, one of the Calc teachers over at Waukesha West.
Welcome.
So I'm glad to hear you speak while Dan pulls up the presentation. I'm glad to hear you speak about just the process of how we've moved to adopt some of our textbooks, because that is exactly what you're going to be hearing now is we're seeking to adopt another AP textbook. This one, though, you're going to hear a lot from Dan and Eric. I'll just share that my first conversation with all of the AP Calc teachers in our district took place sometime, was it last spring, Eric? And it was a 2-hour meeting from 4 to 6 at night. And I left the meeting saying, you guys could rule the world. And I felt like I had listened to them speaking a foreign language. It was the smartest group of people I've ever heard talk. And so I am putting a whole lot of trust in what they're recommending, because quite honestly, I thought of you, Dr. Piasek, when you said I read the book cover to cover. I tried to look at some of what was in the AP Calc book, and it's just foreign to me. So they're going to talk to you about what the process is that they have gone through, but again, similar process of what it is that we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. So we're here tonight because we are looking to adopt a new textbook to support our AP Calculus classes. So the current textbook that is right now used to support the class dates back beyond 10 years. And of course, as you know from this last textbook adoption, the AP College Board does require that you have a textbook within a 10-year window of time. The course was also revised by the AP College Board in the fall of 2020. So we want to make sure that, of course, the curriculum that was newly revised aligns to the resource that we have.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to talk you through a little bit about our process so far and project ahead and what our process will be as we go into piloting and hopefully recommending an adoption of one of the two books that we're going to be piloting this winter. So we have a team between 1 to 3 teachers from every one of our high schools in Waukesha, and we've met for the last 2 months, really considering different texts. And we started with a huge collection, number of texts, and looking at the newly reviewed College Board course framework for AP Calculus, both AB and BC. So we've been vetting textbook resources and trying to figure out what's going to be the best fit for our students and our teachers, and provide them more resources to learn not only within the classroom, but when they're at home as well. At this point, we think we've narrowed it down to the 2 best textbook selections, and Eric's going to talk a little bit more of those highlights right now.
So you could, I believe some of you have our books that we're using right now, and I know the thicker one, the blue one, is copyrighted, is actually 2002. And that's the one, yeah, that's the heavy one, that's the newer version of the one. So those are ones we're using right now, right there. So like I said, those are outdated by about 10 extra years. But honestly, math hasn't changed in the last 100 years, but the AP did realign curriculum last year. So we met, the 5 of us met, we went through, like Dan said, a whole lot of books, and we went through each book making sure that our textbooks that we chose of these 2 covered every topic that's required, the Calc AB and the BC, and we want to narrow it down to 1 book. As you can see right now, we're actually using 2 separate books, the smaller one for the AB, and then the second one, the big blue ones for the BC, and we think that's kind of ridiculous to have 2 different books that's kind of streamed together. So I gotta jump between chapters and books. So when I start, I'm using the old book, and then I go to the new book, and the chapters don't align. So our main goal was to get a book that we could use for both classes. Would save us some money that way also. And the new books that we're looking at are both, I don't want to say recommended by the AP, but the AP has put their stamp on the book saying that everything in there is covered, so we made sure of that. And as we go through, our goal is in January and early February, we're going to pilot sections from each of those books, and then take surveys with our kids, and between the 5 of us and the kids, choose what we feel is the best book moving forward.
Our major focus during that initial review of textbooks was to, just like Eric said, double check that the rigor was appropriate for what our kids are going to have to experience on that AP exam. We wanted to make sure that there was a variety of assessment tasks and question types, that they weren't just looking at calculating numbers, but actually applying their mathematics. So we were really happy with both of these particular text selections. Beyond piloting and getting feedback from our students, we're also going to be digging deeply into the technology resources that are connected to each of the texts. That's something that we haven't been able to fully vet. We're bringing in vendors from each one of those textbook companies to help us out with that process, and really try to get a full scope of what these resources can do for our students. Those are our next steps. Any questions you may have?
Mr. Baumgart.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for operating on the process, not on what's inside the books, because years ago I had to take it because I was in engineering school too. Someday I'm going to actually understand it. But as long as you're working with the process, I think that's important for us as a group to understand that, and I appreciate that. Just one little thing that came up in my mind while you were talking about it, and I'm going to make the assumption it's positive, that is the transition from the non-AP programs that we have for math and calc, et cetera. The way the books are constructed for them, as well as these books, is it a smooth transition in terms of how they work, the books work? Does that make sense? Or did I
We don't have non-AP like calc.
Is that right? There's nothing at the new integrated math that's
Thinking about integrated math 1 and our integrated math 2 through math 3 process, it'll prepare students to get right into all of our calculus options that we currently have.
Okay.
So right now, we have multiple calculus courses. We have Calc AB, which is the first standard AP
First semester
course,
college
first
calculus.
semester college calc. Second semester college calc is called Calculus BC, but we also have something called Accelerated Calc 1 and Accelerated Calc 2. And to take the confusion out, really, it's combining pre-calc, Calc A, B, and BC, which is typically 3 years, and combining that into 2. And our integrated math pathway will prepare students for either of those options.
That's a good answer to my question. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
And we still, I don't know if you want to talk to, we're still in development of what that phase 3 is going to look like.
Yeah, right now, we're really solid on both Math 1 and Math 2 in our curriculum and the options that kids have there. But after Math 2, if you recall, we'll bring back the visual next month, and we continue to give you an update around our math course pathway development. In Math 3, students will have an opportunity to really make a choice to where they want their math course selection to go. Whether they want to go into more of a STEM field, we're going to get that an option there. If they want to go into more of an analytics field, have an option there. If they want to go into more an applied sciences field, we'll hopefully have an option there. And this spring, right, we're going to be bringing together another team of teachers to really fully develop those courses and bring them to you for hopefully approval. But we will have a path that prepares kids for our accelerated and Calc AB and Calc BC. That's without question.
Thank you.
Mr. Como?
Yes, thank you. Are you going to talk on the course framework at all tonight? Or it was one of the handouts that we had, and was this prepared by the College Board and provided to us?
Correct. That course framework was prepared by the College Board. We just wanted to give you a reference as that's the resource that we were working with the textbooks to make sure that the content covered within that framework was also covered in the text.
Okay.
What you'll notice is that the order of those topics may not match, but the content correlates.
Okay, yeah, I thought this was excellent. It's very clearly written, focused. I mean, it's fantastic.
It is a great resource.
Yes.
Yeah. Dr. Piazza?
Thank you. I'm actually excited that we get to transition from composition to calculus. If we could keep this pattern going, I would appreciate it. This is my happy place. I asked to see the old books as well, and I do appreciate that you're trying to kind of move from stacks of books to something that's a little more continuous. So I have just a bunch of unrelated questions. I know that we don't always have enough students to do Calc BC in every high school. And so these are a little bit related questions, but this will be a hard text resource for students. There's not an electronic version of this that we're looking at. Is that correct?
Well, for both books, they have a variety of options.
Okay.
We're particularly looking at hard copy books, but that could change, and we're going to get feedback from students as well.
Yeah.
And we typically will do a mix of both, because we have some students who need the online access. We have other students who need the hard copy. So it's usually never an only one or the other. It's usually a mix of both.
Yeah, and it's more just personal experience that I think, especially with advanced math, that being able to flip back and reference is a lot easier with a hard copy than with a digital copy. So we would have both essentially, and we would have them in all locations if for some reason kids had to move between schools to pick those classes up. So what is the demand looking like for Calc BC? Is it going up, down, flat?
I have the numbers, but I only have them for Calc AB through BC. So typically in any given year, we'll have anywhere between 225 to 275 students that take either one of our calculus courses, which would require one of these books. I did not bring the segmented data with me today, but that's what we're looking at for the full calculus numbers.
Do you have a sense for whether it's going up or down?
I would say it's going I'm not gonna say.
Okay.
We can get back to you on that.
More of a curiosity,
Yeah.
anyway.
I can give you rough guesses right now. At West, we're pretty consistent between 35 and 50 a year on the BC level. North does not have a BC this year, and I believe South has 2 sections, probably close to what my numbers are.
Okay. That's interesting differences between the schools, for sure. South, I would assume, because the engineering prep kids are taken, okay. Couple other questions. As far as the pilot goes, so you've referred to like a 2-month pilot, January, February?
No, we need to get our pilot done by, what's the date you gave me? March. So we're gonna pick, right now, getting close to exam time, Dan will give us a frame, like a timeline when he wants it done. So as a group, we decided we start them in January and make sure we're done by like early February, so then we can come back together end of February and decide on which textbook we're gonna go with.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about what that looks like for the students. Where's the jumping in and out point, and how are they going to transition between the resources and make sure they stay on track for the exams?
So that's what we discussed. So like, for example, for my class, I decided that I'm going to start with, when I finish around exam time a chapter, I will start a new chapter, and I will just take that new book and start with that chapter. And then what I'll go through is the first few sections of it, and then I'll match it with the Yellow Briggs book and continue through the whole chapter. So we will just continue our normal flow. I'll just be using a different textbook at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a concern of ours too, is we don't want to break the flow of learning for our students. So our teachers, our teachers came together and came up with plans for each of our variety of calculus courses for January and February.
Okay.
And that's really conditional of all of our pilots. So you're going to hear, right, with social studies, with ELA, anytime we pilot any resource, we're not introducing new content, we're not shifting away from the current approved curriculum, nor are we shifting away from the current standards. So we're taking a current unit of study, in this case, right, a current content area or a current skill that's already being addressed in AP Calc, and just making sure that now we're using this resource to teach it. It's not going to be something new that we're introducing.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that. I think I see you put a lot of thought into the pilots. I would suspect with the Larson text, you're going to get the same language and the same structure of how they go about some of the problems. And I think with math, that's more of my concern. Is it a completely different?
No, it's going to be, I mean, math hasn't changed in 100 years, to be honest with you. It's just a different type of question in there, like the Blue Larson book. At the end of each chapter has like a practice AP test goes along with the chapter, which I'm really excited about, because like I heard earlier, it's hard to write AP questions. Mm-hmm. And if I grab like release exams, I can't give them to the kids because they'll just Google the answer anyways. So and the nice thing about that one is it gives me another practice AP test for these kids that is very focused for the chapter they're on, so they can see right at the end of this chapter, what's my test going to look like, which is really, because I didn't have that in the other book at all.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. And then, do you have any idea when you'll be back?
Yep, so back in March. So like they mentioned, they're going to be piloting in between now and then. And at the March T&L board meeting, they'll come back with the feedback around those pilots between both students and teachers, and then some pricing around what resource they're going to come forward to recommend.
And I would assume if any other board members would like copies of those calculus textbooks, that they could have those as well.
Yeah, typically once we know what one we're recommending, we will get everybody copies. We typically don't get copies of everything we're going to pilot. Sometimes we pilot more than one, and so, but we can get, yes, anybody who wants a copy, we can get a copy.
Sounds good. Just checking, I'm sure we're all waiting for.
Late night reading.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I have no doubt to believe that we're on track, and you'll be where you need to be come March, just knowing the history of your group, so.
And I believe we are back next month, I believe, for an overall secondary math update.
Okay.
Because again, this is like one, right?
Yes.
Chasm of
all
big
interconnected.
Work, so.
Yes. Great job as always. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, yep.
Have a great night.
Thank you. See you next month.
Yes.
I can't believe you're not as eager as I am to jump right in.
Next discussion information item tonight on our agenda is A high school English update. We have Rachel Herman, our Director of Secondary Learning, and we also have Nancy Ronke and other staff here this evening. If I didn't introduce you, please do so, and welcome to our committee meeting tonight, and we look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you again for being here. I'm actually going to have the team introduce themselves, and we will jump right in with our presentation. So you all know me, and I'm going to have Mike introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Mike Dummel. I'm an English teacher at North High School.
I'm Amy Ontai-Reynolds. I am an English teacher at West High School.
And I'm Nancy. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, welcome.
What we're going to be talking about today is up there. There's our agenda. We're really going to ground it.
You're talking.
Thank you.
Sorry.
We're going to really start with that grounding research that we shared in August, and then do a very brief theory of action, just the one paragraph from it. We're going to talk about October 26th and some of our most recent learning experiences, and then looking at some curricular resources that we are piloting during second semester. So we really want to think about double loop learning and always keep that theory of action and the theories for curriculum, comprehension, and also reading and writing at the forefront of any sort of resource that we would choose or anything that we would curate or write. That's something different than sometimes we usually do, where we just look at the results and the consequences and then see how it's playing out in the classroom. We really want to make sure that that theory is founding everything that we're doing. So if you look at this graphic, it shows that this summer we really focused on learning theory, and that helped lead to our theory of action. That helped pick some curricular resources, and then that will lead to the English units of study. So you might remember this. I wanted to kind of ground our discussion a little bit around this. This is James Zull's learning theory. You do have access to the slideshow. The entire text is right there if you click on The Art of Changing the Brain in case you're interested. But we really dove into chapters 2 and 3 and looked at how learning really does start with that concrete experience, and then it needs to move to that transformation line that's really physically in the brain between the front and the back cortex. We have to make sure that we're doing very intentional learning activities so that students are writing and also speaking about things in order to really learn it, because we want them to be independent learners. That's the goal. And we want them to also move towards active testing, where they're consulting and they're teaching other people, they're speaking to authentic audiences. That's connected to the gradual release of responsibility, or if you've heard of GRR, which is foundational. It's a foundational in Waukesha. It's an instructional framework that is around, like, it's the bedrock of everything that we do. When you hear of core strategies and things like that, that's connected to gradual release of responsibility. This summer, we analyzed that learning theory, and you're going to see different colors there. So where it's yellow and red, that means, that we need some work around that. So the green, we kind of felt confident in the concrete experiences, but when it comes to a little bit before that transformation line and the abstract hypothesis, those were some areas where we needed some work. So things like small group instruction, like what does that really look like at the secondary level? We knew as a team that was something that we wanted to work on, and resources that we wanted to have to really target that area. So we did read a novel approach. I'll have Mike and Amy kind of speak about this.
Sure. A Novel Approach by Kate Roberts was a book that we used to kind of ground our thinking around a couple of different topics. One of them being, how do we blend the use of a whole class novel where every student reads the same book, which has been a kind of a traditional English approach, with also incorporating student choice. So this book by Kate Roberts gave us one model of thinking about that. More importantly, I think, with regard to gradual release of responsibility, GRR, this book gave us a lot of methodology for. Thank you.
I know.
Give us a lot of methodology for thinking about how to really focus on that the collaborative middle step, and gave us a lot of great resources and strategies for helping us kind of live there a little bit longer, so that students get to really dive in during the collaborative stage of the learning. So that was really kind of a good grounding for us.
The text has videos that go with it, so I'm not going to play this whole thing for you, but this is Kate Roberts, the author of the book, and this is the small group instruction during, I believe it was Kite Runner. So she was trying to explain to the group, like, this is what goes on in my head, and then she's having the students think about that. So when they come to a complex text and something that trips them up when they're reading, they don't go around that, they go through it. And that's what that transformation line is really about, and creating independent learners and nurturing independent learners. Okay, then we moved on to that theory of action based on that research. And Mike will speak a little bit about this.
Yes, so one important thing about the theory of action here is that the theory of action that we're presenting at the bottom of this slide is our current, that's where we've landed at this moment. But we understand that the middle school curriculum visioning team is yet to convene and come up with a theory of action of their own. So this is kind of anticipating our ultimate goal of having one unified theory of action that would represent all of secondary learning. So this is our draft so far, what we have.
So our visioning team, as you know, has worked incredibly hard over the summer into this school year. Again, looking at the research, looking at best practice, working with one another around what current practice looks like, and talking as a educator team. We had building administrators on that team. We had special education representatives on that team. We had our ESL teacher leaders on that team. And so what we did in November was we brought all of that work to our district curriculum council. So that is our parent committee, and we brought to them the work that has taken place so far and the culmination of that work, which was that theory of action. This is what we believe the ELA experience at the high school level should look like, should feel like, should sound like. We shared with our district curriculum council the 5 key shifts in these standards that I know we've shared with you way in the beginning this past summer when we started this work. And so we wanted to gather their feedback. And so we had some learning, and then we had 3, I would not fairly simple, but some simple prompts. How does this vision support the shifts in the standards that you just learned about? So, like, did we make our mark? What excites you as a parent about this vision as you think about your child's literacy experience? And then what wonders do you have? And so we received, we have 40 team members, and we received a lot of really positive feedback. People really saw this connection between the vision that we have and the standards. They supported that there was absolutely an integration in our vision and the standards around rich and diverse perspectives, languages, resources. It was a learner-driven environment. There was critical thinking around complex texts that came up over and over and over again, that we need our students to be engaging in rigorous language experiences. What excited our parents was that at the center of all of this was developing college, career, and community readiness. It was going to be personally relevant to their child, that there was collaboration, critical thinking. One thing that continued to come up was this access to grade level content for every student, even if their child wasn't necessarily at grade level. And so something that Mike just spoke about, and that Nancy also spoke about, was this idea that sometimes when we use this approach of one text for all, we know that not all students can access that text without supports, scaffolds, strategies. And so our learning as a team continues to be around, we can't lower our standards. We can't provide text and resources that continue to be below grade level. We know that that's not going to promote achievement. We have to find ways to support students to access that grade level curriculum. And so our work is, how do we do that? How do we do that? That's through small guided group instruction. That's through collaboration around supporting our most thriving, striving students, through language acquisition plans, and with core strategies. And then some of the wonders was, is this a vision for dual language? Do we have dual language and in high school? So just some of that knowledge bank. Grading expectations around this vision. So just still having some questions around there. And then how do students access that support if they're not at grade level? So really good wonders, really thoughtful discussion, but overall just such incredible positive feedback around what has been developed thus far. And so we will continue to use the District Curriculum Council as our feedback committee. But again, really positive feedback that was expressed.
So in October, we had a really unique and positive experience. The visioning team got to hear not only from alumni voices, which I believe you have access to, correct? To talk about their experience, the benefits of their English education in the school district of Waukesha and some of the gaps that they experienced. But we also got to take that into classrooms, including a second grade classroom, which you'll see a little moment of right now. And so what we got to see, what you saw there was what that literacy instruction looks like in a second grade classroom, what some of the kind of that double loop learning looks like, so that we, as we're planning and implementing, can ensure that we are building an appropriate scope and sequence. And then we moved into an 8th grade classroom as well, where we also got to take a look at how those shifts in the content standards are playing out currently for our middle school students. So again, we know as we're implementing curriculum at the high school level that we are meeting students where they're at, that we're providing some of that concrete experience, but also that abstract hypothesis, how we take whole group instruction and whole class reading and utilize that as a strategy to foster independent learning.
And part of this is when the piloting team and the visioning team met this summer, there was a theme about things feel very heavy on individual teachers. So part of the reason we went into second grade classrooms, 4th, 8th, 5th, was to show that as a system, it's really not heavy. If we really focus on the standards and work together, it's not heavy on any individual. We are looking at some curricular resources right now. We're currently about to pilot or are piloting My Perspectives. And then we, as a visioning team in February, are going to look at Springboard and make sure that it aligns to our theory of action and our vision. So I wanted to show sort of what those curricular resources look like. My Perspectives has a perfect score on EdReports, which is unheard of. The authors of it are gurus in the literacy world. Kelly Gallagher, who just retired after 40 years of teaching. He's written many, many books. Also Jim Cummins, who is a guru when it comes to English language learners. He's one of the authors. And Freddie Hebert, who is a guru when it comes to vocabulary. So what's interesting about My Perspectives is it is a very comprehensive resource that has both texts, consumables for students, and also online resources that have whole group class learning, small group, independent learning, and then the performance-based assessment is that pre-assessment and then midway through and then at the end, and those assessments connect. There's also a unit reflection so that students can be independent learners and be metacognitive about what they learned and what they could get better at. Very student-centered. So that's what we've just kind of started cracking the book open right now. But I was at North today and I took this picture of a North High School junior, and 100% of the students in there were annotating the Crucible and then not acting it out, but they were reading it and having discussions through that whole class learning.
Nancy, I'm just
Yes,
going
go
to add in, in terms of moving to the decision to look at pilot resources, something that we did discover in going through phase one, very similar to social studies, very similar to math, is that we had been home growing, again, a lot of our curriculum for our regular required high school courses. So this theme of, right, our AP courses, having a structured curricular resource to support their course, like that's kind of always been commonplace. For our regular required courses, what we discovered is we've really been home growing it. We're pulling resources, we're trying to, right, find this short story here, this poem here, this nonfiction article here. And so the decision to look at, do we need a resource to support the shift in standards, was made based on that data analysis, based on some of that visioning work that happened in phase one. In addition, part of the reason we landed on these two Nancy referenced ED reports, which I believe you are all familiar with, but that is a national organization that curates curricular resources in the area of English, math, and science. It's one of our go-to places to see what are the top resources. And we also surveyed surrounding districts to see what they are using and what success they are having. And again, these were two of the top resources that we landed on. Obviously, if through the pilot, they aren't the resources that best serve our students, we don't settle. But I just wanted to provide that context of how we landed on these and why we're piloting in the first place.
And the second one that we're going to be looking at with the visioning team is Springboard. That is connected to College Board. So a lot of the AP resources that you've looked at, Springboard aligns to that. And this would be for that, for the students who aren't in that AP, but it would prepare them to at any point be able to jump into those AP courses. The door, the window isn't closed for them. It keeps it open. I'd also like to direct you to what it says on the bottom. So it says language workshop, which is that concrete experience, a lot of student discourse, preparing students to go through that transformation line. Then there's close reading workshops with Springboard where you go back and you revisit. There's lots of scaffolding. And then there's the reading and the writing workshops that are very differentiated for all students. And then we'll take questions.
Mr. Como.
Thank you. As part of assessing the students, one of our goals is to improve the independent learning, as you had talked about. Do you assess independent learning in this process at all? And how is that, I guess, assessed?
I love that question. It's a fantastic question. The performance-based assessments for all of those resources really are what can students do independently. What's beautiful about that is that performance-based assessments on all the resources that we're looking at isn't just like a one-shot thing. It keeps going back to it throughout the unit of study. So there's lots of modeling that can happen. If you're reading The Crucible, you're looking at what skills are being used, what did Arthur Miller do, how can we transfer that into our writing and our reading for the performance assessment, and then what can we do more independently at the end. So definitely, especially how both resources are set up to move from whole class learning, then that small group, and then independent learning. It's kind of a nice, beautiful transition, how it's set up that way.
And further along, any student or any person can get in independent learning. Is so important, and you can, I guess, go wherever you want to go and learn about whatever you want to learn about, which ultimately, hopefully that's where our kids are getting to, right, as they mature and they're making their decisions as to what they're going to do with their lives. So this is very interesting. And are we looking at that in, I guess, other courses?
Yeah, so I'll speak to that. Nancy referenced earlier the gradual release of responsibility, and that is the foundation to everything that we do. Our secondary schools across the board this year have used that as the that is their central focus, the area that they are developing themselves in as administrators and coaches this year. What is the gradual release of responsibility as an instructional framework? What does it mean to do it well? Because the end result of doing it well is independent learning. You are nurturing independent learners. And so this year, and we can most certainly talk about including this in perhaps a Friday board update, I can share with you what that learning has looked like for our administrators and our coaches. Some of our teachers, we call them lead teachers across all content areas. We have business teachers, art teachers, literacy teachers, social studies teachers across all content areas are engaging in this learning as well. And then next year, the intention is that we would be going larger scale with it. But again, that idea of gradual release of responsibility being the foundation, it is the theory that drives this practice of developing student independence. And it starts with that idea of we model, we then give students time to practice, and then we, through that practice, providing feedback, providing opportunities for them to fail sometimes, right, and learn from that, move into that independence. And so I'm happy to provide you that update because it's definitely something that we are doing full scale across all of our secondary schools. And in our elementary, it's central to our elementary framework as well.
That's pretty exciting.
It's really exciting.
To tie a couple of those pieces together, is it okay if we go back to the my perspectives? I think I'm going to jump this way. As we talk about gradual release of responsibility, and also to go back to what Rachel had said earlier, in that kind of home-growing curriculum, when we look at the performance-based assessment in particular, and leveling that in, layering that in with gradual release of responsibility, the onus has really been on us to authentically create multiple opportunities to visit and revisit whatever that performance task is. Which we of course try to do with fidelity, but can be very complex. And so within my perspectives, we can see an assessment introduced at the opening of a unit, and then there are those opportunities to engage in that with the whole class. We do together to release some of that responsibility to a smaller group, and then ultimately in the end to turn that over to students. So there is a lot of low stakes practice with supports that we remove as students are ready to have those removed.
Yeah, that is very exciting. I'll speak from a small business owner perspective, entrepreneur. I can't even count the number of topics I've had to dive into and knew absolutely nothing about. And if I wasn't an independent learner, there'd be no way I could be a small business owner. And there's many, many other examples. I don't mean that that's the only example that's out there. There's many of them. And how useful it is to be just really wanting to learn and not being afraid to take on something that, you have no clue what it's all about. Right. And to dive in and to go for it and to not be afraid of that and to realize that, much can be accomplished even if you know like this much. Maybe the calculus stuff would be pretty tough for me here, but
Well, Mr. Como, go ahead. You're bringing up a really good point about competence before confidence, because this is grade level text for 9 through 12. So students who maybe feel like, I can't read at that 12th grade level, there is the support so that they will be reading at the 12th grade level.
Okay.
And that will eventually build their confidence. But we don't start with that confidence first, we build their competence.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Baumgarten.
As I look at this and hear some of your comments about independent learning, I also flash back to Flight, Compass, and Quest, which has built a lot of, I believe the concept was to build a lot of independent learning. Maybe they didn't think of it that way, but the way the kids are working, aren't they doing the independent learning thing to a certain extent? And how does that compare with what you're seeking at the high school level?
Yeah, so I don't want to confuse discovery learning with independent learning. And so this idea of an inquiry-based approach, which perhaps is more of a flight model, where I right? Here's the standard, and how I meet that standard is dictated by perhaps my own interest, my own pathway, right? That's not what we're talking about here. The independent learning that we're talking about here is the ability for a student to demonstrate a skill or to demonstrate their understanding of a topic, a concept, independently. And so when we talk about things like writing or critical analysis or a formulation of an argument, when we first introduce that skill, we're typically, and I'm going to have the teacher speak to this, but I was in Mike's classroom not too long ago where I watched him model how to draft a hook, right? A hook statement and what that's going to look like and how do I, right, capture my audience. So we have to model that for kids typically when they're introduced to a new skill. And then typically we want them to grapple with that, so we give them some collaborative practice. Okay, I want you to now, right, try, and I'm going to give you this topic together with a group. I want you to write a hook, right, using your peers. This is a very basic example that I'm giving you. And now I'm going to give you some feedback in your groups while you're doing that. And the topics that I might give my groups might be a little bit different based on the groups, right? And now, independently, I want you to try and do that with your own piece of writing. That's the independent we're talking about, not necessarily pick your own path. Sometimes it's that inquiry-based learning, but not all the time. And so it's I would say different that way. And again, we're still doing a lot of learning, but it's definitely not that inquiry-based approach where students are picking all sorts of different pathways for how they're going to demonstrate the standard.
You're not really saying they're different, but one might feed to the other, the way I read it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Piazza.
Thank you. Obviously, there's a ton of work that's gone into all this. I have some questions that might sound a little bit ignorant, and I just am struggling to kind of ground myself in where we're at in the process right now, and maybe, not to get too far ahead, but what the end looks like. We've talked about, you know, when I see like comparisons of a novel approach to CLM, are we definitively we're moving away from CLM and we're embracing the novel approach? Has that been decided? And how are we piloting things if we haven't decided that? I'm just kind of curious, like.
It's a great question.
And I apologize if I'm missing something, but I'm struggling with like where the you are here map. I need that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in on this one because I think many of us on the team were in that same position, kind of grappling with are these competing models? And ultimately where I've landed is that the CLM model is ultimately the model that we see as best practice. So I don't think we're in any way abandoning that. What we're recognizing is that even with best intentions, it's not always happening at the high school level. And so programs like My Perspectives have built into them structurally those elements. The whole group instruction with the small group, the independent, the reading, the writing workshop that are integral in CLM are woven into the program and within each unit in the program. So it wasn't a movement away from one or from one to another. A novel approach and the idea of how we tackle a whole class read is also embedded within My Perspective and how it's sequenced between class periods and within a unit versus a unit later in the school year when there's more independence.
Just a couple follow-up thoughts. Thank you. Is there consensus that CLM is the best practice? Yeah.
Yeah, the comprehensive literacy model really is a combination of best practices. So it's a group of people that are part of the partnerships in comprehensive literacy. So you have cutting edge researchers who are part of it. There's connections with universities. There's education classes that both Jake Paulson and I take throughout the week to stay at cutting edge. So it's comprehensive literacy model isn't a program. It really is best practices, and at the foundation of comprehensive literacy model is nurturing independent learners using gradual release of responsibility. So no matter what curricular resource, we're going to use a curricular resource that fits into that framework.
I think the other piece I would add to that is we work with consultants out of our partnerships with comprehensive literacy, which is one branch of that is around the CLM model. And one of the things that our representative, our consultant recently said is, to speak to what Nancy said, CLM is best practice. It's not a script. It's not a program. It's not a template. And so to say it's not working, or do we believe or not believe in it, is to say we don't buy into best practice. And so what we are continually doing is saying, what does the research say? So again, our team is looking at, the book that we've chosen to align to, Kate Roberts' A Novel Approach, we brought that in. We brought in some of the readings that we mentioned, Zoll, The Art of Changing the Brain. We're constantly bringing in theory and research to ground our decision-making, because that's what the model is. It's pointing to what does your research and theory say, and how does that fit into what now you're going to implement. And I think that that's the beauty of comprehensive literacy, is that it's not a script, it's not a program, it's not a basal, because we know that our students come to us with diverse needs, complex backgrounds. Not every student who's sitting in our classrooms comes to us with the same level. And so to teach from a program doesn't serve them. We need that complex approach. We need a way to teach all of them in the room. And that's going to come by pulling from multiple areas to figure out, how are we going to do this? And so, like Nancy referenced, the resources currently that we are looking at have all of the components that allow us to do that.
And the visioning team had that same exact question. I do have a pretty comprehensive answer to that. That's a lot of pages, but it's called the connections document. I'd love to share that with Rachel, and then she could share that with the board.
That'd be great. Maybe just as a follow-up, as we move toward piloting curricular resources, just focus on the high school level at this point is what we're talking about, right? And then this discussion around whole class novels, which, again, based on what Rachel just said, becomes more complex just because of where the kids are coming from. Will those, the selection of those novels be part of the curricular resources? Will they be standardized by grade level across the district, or will they be more flexible?
So I can answer that, because I think that goes to your question about where are we, what phase are we in, right? So we are still technically in phase 1 of the curricular design process. So we have shared with you, you all know the curricular design process. We are still technically in phase 1. Once we land on a curricular resource that we would then come to you, just like we have with all of our other curricular resources, and seek to adopt, then we would move into phase 2, which is writing our scope and sequence, creating our course syllabus, and that would be where we would come to you with the suggestions for whole class novels that would support our curriculum. Anything that we are going to say is a guaranteed part of our curriculum, we would require that the board approves. So that would be our whole class novels, and that would be in phase 2, which we're anticipating right now. We're going to get to sometime late spring and into summer. But again, that's all dependent on the pilots. Like I said before, we're not going to settle. And so if, as we pilot, we realize neither of these resources are what we want, we may have to look at something else. But right now, that's phase 2, and we're looking at that in late spring, early summer. And then that would come to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Como?
Hey, just real quick, with CLM being a set of best practices, those change constantly, but it's almost impossible to do all best practices and keep up with the latest best practices. You have to, at some point in time, say, this is what we're going to do. Who decides that, and how do we go about making that decision?
Do you want to take this? Sure. Well, I think about the theory, like the theory that goes with the comprehensive literacy model, that doesn't change with the wind. So something that's foundational to the comprehensive literacy model is metacognition. So students being able to talk about what they're thinking, a teacher conferring with a student and saying, what's going on in your brain right now? And the student articulating that, just like you saw the student council members articulating that, that's what we're talking about. Not just in student council, but like every single minute of the day and every content. So things like metacognition, things like nurturing independent learners aren't fads. Like they really are bedrock type of things, and that's the part. It's not about the strategy. Like the strategy might change. You might call it something one year, and then 5 years from now you'd call that strategy something else. But at the core, it's about metacognition and students like really owning the learning cycle process.
Fair enough. So it's, I guess maybe if I was to summarize your answer, that even though we're following, this is a set of best practices, the essence of them doesn't necessarily change constantly.
Correct. Like if you think about things like disciplinary literacy, like that term maybe was like a buzzword a few years ago or something like that. But when you look back at the research of disciplinary literacy, it dates back to the 1800s. So the idea of being able to transfer knowledge, and that's another big foundational bedrock thing for the comprehensive literacy model. How are students transferring their knowledge, not just in class, like a little ping pong, but between classes into the real world? There has to be an authentic audience. They have to be consultants. It's about empowering students, empowering teachers, empowering families. That's what the comprehensive literacy model is all about.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Guess that's it.
Yeah, so we will be back to continue to update you around how our pilots are going, and again, coming forward then with a recommendation once we have it.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Nice job tonight with the presentation,
Okay.
answering all of our questions. Appreciate it.
Go get my social studies team. Thank you. 2, 3, 4, 4.
Next discussion information item this evening is a secondary social studies update. We have, if you don't know her by now, Rachel Herman. She is our Director of Secondary Learning.
In the exact summary.
Welcome, Rachel.
Okay, that's okay.
She needs a name
It's
tag.
okay if you didn't.
Yeah.
No, that was for ELA.
Her spot.
It's okay if you didn't.
Her own seat.
There's chairs for everybody.
There is.
You get to sit right by me.
They've been sitting outside waiting.
Oh, wow.
Okay,
Nice.
that's fine.
The microphone's by you.
Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
All right.
What's this? Is this a microphone?
That's the microphone.
Okay.
All right. And just one last transition. Mark would know this. He's tech. I don't have the present button on my.
Yeah, you just click slideshow now. It just.
Oh, that's what you're telling me. Okay. All right. Well, hello, everybody. This is the final presentation for Rachel tonight. So let's make it a good one, you guys. Okay. All right. All right. So I'm going to have the team introduce themselves, and then we will go ahead and get started. Mark, you want to start?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Mark Anderson. I teach at West High School. I'm currently teaching Human Geography, AP Human Geography, and AVID. And I guess I've been here a few times recently to talk to you, so good to see you all.
Thank you.
I'm Brett Hochstetter. I am a Human Geography, AVID, and U.S. History teacher at South. This is my 4th year at South.
I'm Kieran Morris. This is my 4th year at North. I teach U.S. History, Criminal Justice, and Human Geography.
My name is Iris Sevilla. I am the ELL teacher lead at West. I co-teach both history and AP Spanish.
Jim, could you use your mic? Okay. All right, so this is a small part of an incredibly large, amazing high school social studies team that has been working very hard since the start of the year to move through. We started our curricular revision process, and so our presentation tonight is going to take you through where we have been and where we are continuing to go. So wanted to update you that the team came together in October, so that was our first meeting, and our goal was to move through phase 1 of that curricular design process. Our team included administrators, general education teachers, special education teachers, and ESL teachers. What we did during that time is we conducted a data analysis, so we spent some time with our forward data. You're going to hear about that in a little bit. The high school social studies department is composed, we have quite a big department, we have a lot of courses, and so as we move through this design, this year we are really focused on our required courses for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. And so when we are talking through this tonight, the data analysis, the standards that have been unpacked, we're really focusing on human geography, which is taught at our 9th grade level, world history, which is at our 10th grade level, and then U.S. history, which is at our 11th grade level. So that team that came together, we did a data analysis, we unpacked standards, and then we began to vet resources based on a root cause analysis of what we felt we needed to do to change the trajectory of some of the results that, again, we're going to share with you. Just in case you were wondering, I thought I would include this line. Our middle school team, because this is technically a secondary update, our middle school team is moving fast and furious, continuing to pilot their resources. They came to you, I believe, in October to share with you what they were going to be piloting. We actually just met this morning. They're finishing up with one pilot, moving right into the other, and they will be back in 2 months to share with you the results of their pilot. But not much has changed. They are continuing to collect their student feedback, give teacher feedback, and moving with those pilots that we discussed with you last time. So this presentation will really just focus on where the high school is at. Just to remind you of our timeline around the curricular revision for social studies. So again, back in summer, we started with middle school. As you can see by the number of updates around curricular revision taking place, we're trying to time this out so that we don't have, 100 pilots all happening at one time. And so middle school started a little bit earlier than high school. High school is starting with their pilots and phase 1 right about now. Between November and March, we're anticipating that both the high school and the middle school will both conduct their pilots and come forward with a recommendation of what resource would support their courses. And then in late spring, per obviously the board's approval of those resources, we would then be looking to move to phase 2 of the curricular design process, where we would then start to, again, draft our scope and sequence and write our course syllabus. I just put a note on here. Again, we offer several electives, AP courses. Those are all slated to be tackled under curricular revision in the 22-23 school year. We thought it was important to tackle our required courses first. So I'm going to have the team talk to you a little bit first about our data analysis. This is where we started, is where we currently stand. And so I am going to have Brett start us out.
So looking at our overall 10th grade student performance skills, we can our scores, we've been pretty stagnant over the last few years, kind of all spread out evenly there. And with being this year will be assessed on new standards, we kind of want to get ahead of it and start preparing a little bit more for these standards. We of course want to see improvements in growth on our scores, which is one of the main reasons that we're doing this revamp. Kind of part of our theory of action here is geared towards addressing our student needs and improving our scores. Without district textbooks specifically right now, we often spend a lot of time finding the resources to share with the students and kind of get the content out, rather than spending time scaffolding these sources to make sure that all students kind of have the ability to practice our skills. So that's kind of our main part here. And then specifically with this group, our Black students here, there's a pretty big area of concern. We have that disproportionate amount of students' performance here We did see a little bit of growth from the 18 to 19 to the 2021 school year for our scores. But again, we really want to come back to really creating these scaffolds and these opportunities to practice these skills along with our content rather than spending time finding the resources to get the content across.
In regards to Hispanic students, the data clearly shows that the majority of these students are continuing to underperform, and the percentage of students who are proficient has significantly declined. Although this may be attributed to numerous factors, it is clear that these students are not meeting or making the significant gains they need to be successful or at level with their peers in the Department of Social Studies. By adopting a resource that provides a variety of sources and narratives, educators will have the tools to provide the supports needed for these students. In particular to ELL students, the performance of ELL students in this area is of great concern. Forward data indicates that the trend over time is that none of the 10th grade ELL students are showing proficiency on the social studies portion of the forward exam. And again, though these may be attributed to many different factors, it is clear that something needs to change for these students in order to make the academic gains necessary to be successful. We anticipate that a change to a resource that has built-in supports for ELL students and provides multiple resources that include a variety of complex text will not only support academic language for ELL students, but will also give them access to the content at their level. Currently, like Brett said, educators are curating a lot of their own resources, which is also very time-consuming. And by providing a high-quality resource, teachers can better spend their time collaborating with other educators, reviewing formative data, and engaging in responsive teaching, and building those much-needed scaffolds through a common lens. Much is similar with students with IEPs. The data shows that students with IEPs are also struggling and are achieving at a below basic level, with very few at the basic and proficient level. Again, by providing a high-quality resource, educators will be able to meet the needs of their students through a variety of tools that will allow educators to be more effective at providing accommodations and modifications, especially in unsupported classes. Having a resource that provides the option to read aloud text or simply level text and is aligned with the standards is essential for students with IEPs to meet their academic goals.
So I guess I'm going to transition a little bit then, because I am not talking about the forward data, and I'm just going to share some trends in AP data with you. Now, as part of that transition, you know, there's a million different ways that the group, we could try to explain how the scores you just looked at happened. But I think the point is, rather than try to explain it, the point is that everybody here wants to fix it. And the last time I was here with you, we were talking about a new advanced placement textbook, and for human geography in particular. And while I'm going to share with you some data from human geography, world history, and U.S. history, I'm going to speak mostly from the place that I know, which is human geography. Now, if you look at these scores over the last 5 years, if you can find a significant trend in there, then you're better at data analysis than I am. Because what I see is I see scores that hover for each school, with some exception, right around the same score. Now, when I think about human geography in particular, I see every year when students take the AP test, There's a lot of variables that, again, go into scores. How many students are taking the class? How many students are trying to take the exam? How many students are taking a stretch class and trying a class that they're not confident they're going to be successful in? But what I'm hoping to be able to report the next time we look at these scores, especially with the new resource that we adopted, is to start seeing the consistent trend going up. And as I look at my students interacting with the book that we vetted and the text we vetted last year, my scores on tests are higher than they have been. Student engagement in the class is higher than it's been. And I'm hoping that we're going to see some of those same trends then move into the regular social studies curriculum. And so I'm not going to bore you with with reading all of these numbers to you, but what I do want to make sure that the group recognizes is what the AP scores mean, and I apologize if that seems, like maybe that's common knowledge, but I feel like I should explain. It's on a 1 to 5 scale, right? And if a student scores a 3 on an AP test, that is considered a passing score by most universities, and it's the equivalent, they say, of between a C plus or a B minus in a college course. If a student scores a 4, that's looking around a B plus, A minus region, and a 5 is considered exceptionally well qualified, and is an A to an A plus equivalent of a college course. And so that is what those scores mean when you look at them. And then we can, again, go to the United States History 1. And again, as we move forward, we're not just looking at textbooks. We also are looking at the way we teach. We're looking at the implementation of an AVID-like curriculum. We're looking at an implementation of more engaging strategies. We're looking at a development of questions and inquiry that will draw students more into what they're learning. And that work, while it started a while ago, and I'm not a person who blames everything on COVID, the fact is that things stalled and started and stalled and started with those changes. And so I'm hoping that, again, we're going to see in our AP data, just like I am confident we will see in our forward data, as we get these new strategies, plus more collaboration among schools, plus these new resources, I think we'll have more positive news to continue to report.
And I would add that, like I mentioned in the beginning, AP courses were not a part of our deep dive in terms of the curricular revision. As we continue to revisit those courses, we will continue to do a deep dive around this data, who's taking our AP classes, how many kids are testing. We'll continue to do a deeper dive analysis around some of this data. At this point in time, though, we were just focusing on our regular required courses. So, as Mark mentioned, one of the things that this team has been working for a while, we talked to you, I believe it was this summer, about a book study that the team had done around an inquiry design model aligned to the national standards. And so what this team came to at the end of the day in October was what we call our theory of action, right? What are we going to do about this data storyline? How does what we're going to do align to best practice in what we know about social studies instruction? And so I've included for you, you have Appendix A that was filled out for you in that is something that the team collectively developed. And again, much appreciation to this team for their hard work on that. And so what we came up with after much conversation is that at this point, the team's next step is a requirement of a guaranteed and viable curriculum that aligns to the grade level standards, that we can be sure is aligned to the grade level standards. And right now, we can't always ensure that when, again, teachers are curating their own curriculum. To understand what a 9th grader needs versus a 10th grader needs, there are 26 standards. That's a heavy lift for a teacher. But we know that that's absolutely essential because that is what our students are being assessed on. We need a curriculum that prioritizes an integrated approach to social studies, where we take all of those disciplines that, again, we have talked to you about before, the behavioral sciences, economics, geography, history, and political science, and integrates them and does not treat those as a silo. We need to ensure access for all learners. So you looked at some data where it's very clear that some of our groups of students are not currently thriving in our classrooms. And so we need to ensure curriculum and instruction that all of our students can have success within. And then lastly, we need a guaranteed and viable curriculum that represents the students that we serve, their backgrounds, their identities, and their narratives. Standards demand it, and our best practice demands it. And so by doing this, by having a guaranteed and viable curriculum that allows us to do this, teachers can now spend their time planning, co-planning, scaffolding, building authentic relationships, collaborating with other teachers around the formative and the summative assessment. That is where the magic happens. When teachers can walk in and know this is where my students stand in comparison to where they need to be. This is what I need to do to help them to reach that goal. In some cases, that happens through a professional learning community or a PLC, you've probably heard it called. In some cases, that happens through a department meeting. Like, that's where the magic happens. But they can't do that if they're busy finding the primary source that they're supposed to use to meet the standard. They can't do that if they're busy unpacking the standard that they're supposed to teach because the standards were newly revised and they don't even know what they mean. And so that is what led us down the path to decide that we did want to look at a curricular resource. We do not have them in any of our regular courses. All of our curriculum for almost all of our regular social studies courses, including our electives, is homegrown. We do not have textbooks to support it. And so as part of the team's analysis, I think when they came into the room, I'll just, their faces, it was kind of like I felt like Santa Claus. We had all the textbook samples lined up and they looked at me like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. Like, you're really serious, you weren't kidding, we can move down a path where we might actually have a resource. And we don't have to do all of this on our own. And it was like a sigh of relief. So we think that we're moving in the right path that way. In addition, we looked at our course sequence in social studies. So this is a significant shift. Currently, our district requires 3.5 credits of social studies. We are not recommending a change in that credit requirement. However, we are recommending a change in what courses would be required. So the current required courses are that students take a full year of human geography or AP Human Geo, a semester of world history or the full year of AP World, the full year of US history or AP, and then students are required to take that half semester of government. That is state statute that students are required to take government, or they can take that AP government. And then currently we require them to take a half a credit of economics, or they can take the AP economics. Our proposed required courses beginning in the 23-24 school year would be a shift in that sophomore year requirement. We would be looking to move that world history to a full year world history course instead of a semester, and drop the econ requirement. So it would look like a full year freshman year of human geo or AP, full year of world history or AP world, full year of US or AP, and then the 0.5 of government. It's important to note that with this shift, students would still be able to take econ. We're not dropping econ as a course. It would still be offered as an elective. AP econ would still be offered. It would just not be required. And so the rationale for this is a really text-heavy slide, but I didn't know how else to summarize it. This was about, I would say, an hour-and-a-half discussion with our team. We then brought all of the social studies team members together, even social studies team members who weren't a part of our visioning team, to collect their feedback. And then I went around and met with all of our econ teachers to just collect additional feedback around this shift. And so the big rationale for this is obviously first and foremost, right, our student achievement. We are continuing to see that at that 10th grade level, our students are not demonstrating to us the disciplinary literacy skills that we know are going to help them to get to that college and career readiness. We believe that that full year-long social studies experience is going to ensure that they have access to complex text, that they are writing, reading, speaking every day. That is different than if they are in an elective where we don't know that we can necessarily ensure that, okay? In addition, the new state standards demand an integration of econ into all of those other content areas. So by not requiring economics, we're not saying students are not getting any of the concepts of economics. They are now, right, because of the new way that standards are revised, economics is embedded within that experience in human geo, in world, and in U.S. history. In addition, our team had a lot of conversation about the continual need to provide our students with a global perspective. And we live, right, in a global connected community. This is a course whose content naturally allows us to do that. Some of our teachers shared stories that were absolutely just remarkable about their students, saying things like, this is the first time in this course that I saw myself portrayed in the curriculum in a positive light. This is the first time that I saw my ancestors reflected in the curriculum in a positive light. And this was right from the mouths of our teachers. And so that factored into this decision. In comparing other districts then across the county, we looked at, is econ required, is it not? It was completely balanced. We saw some districts where economics was required, and in other districts it wasn't. And that brings us to the why, which is personal finance. The state in 2015, I believe, but it could have been earlier. It might be 2006. Do not quote me on that because now I'm getting my dates wrong. But required personal finance be taught. And at that point in time, Waukesha was going to address that by putting those standards in econ. Well, the state recently revised those personal finance standards in 2020. With the shift that we would be suggesting in not requiring econ, what we would be recommending is that personal finance, which is a course that we already have on our books in Waukesha, that we would be requiring students to take that course sometime as part of their elective experience. So it would count as an elective, it would be required, if that makes sense. We have funds available to supplement that curriculum through the Next Generation Grant, so working closely with Molly Hallberger Molly Habenshield, to make sure that we can make sure that that curriculum is up to date with the newly revised standards. And if you look, some of those same concepts, money management, planning, saving, income affecting purchasing and spending decisions, these are the personal finance standards. And when we looked and did a comparison of what was currently being done in our economics class versus our personal finance was actually closer to what the actual state is requiring in terms of meeting the personal finance standards. And so that's really, again, the rationale behind the recommendation. Our team, again, weighed that decision very carefully because, again, we don't take any of the things that we're going to require a student to do lightly. And so that at this point in time would be the recommendation. That recommendation would be taken through Dr. Cook and the policy committee because currently, like I said, in our policy, we list 3.5 credits of social studies. We do currently list what classes they take, and so that's something that once the team continues to move forward with the recommendation, we would bring through policy and then back through the full board. Yeah.
Last issue is my first question here.
Yeah.
Is this a half credit course or a full credit course?
The econ.
Personal finance.
A half credit.
Half credit.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was, I'm a little a while back surprised when we were dropping econ because we were one of the few people, let's be honest about it, we were one of the few districts that really maintained that course.
Correct.
Yet, I think you've resolved some of my concerns because the way you've rearranged some of the stuff, I think, is important. And particularly the requiring personal finance as an elective. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of a oxymoron, I think.
It is, it is. It would count towards their elective
Yeah,
requirements.
but the restructure of this, particularly the economics part of it
Mhm.
is satisfying to me. I was a little bit concerned about that previously, but.
And I would just add that the economics teachers whom I spoke with, and the social studies team, and please chime in, you guys, that was the feedback, was we need to ensure that those personal finance standards are still being taught. And so once we were able to identify that, A, not only do we already have a course on the books, but that B, we have access to grant funds that could supplement and support that revision to the curriculum with the newly revised standards, that really put all of their minds at ease. But again, does anybody want to offer any additional feedback?
Well, I think, part of it is when you're teachers and you're talking about what classes are going to be taught, you always have to separate this is my class that I teach, this is what I do, versus what do the students need and what is best for them. So to be fair, I expected a significant amount more pushback from the economics teachers about the prospect of moving it to an elective than we got. And I guess that's admirable that they were willing to look at not what is good for me, but what is good for the group. I also think that we didn't stress enough the idea of having a consistent full year of social studies at the sophomore level, because it is very challenging for students to go currently and have, I've always had social studies, now I have this semesterized curriculum that doesn't have continuity all of the time, where some students are taking it for a year and some are taking it for a semester. And I feel like that common intellectual experience is so important for the younger levels in particular. And so I didn't want to leave that be glossed over.
Rachel, I had another point on the way you reconstructed all of this is interesting, but if you're moving a lot of the economics into the other courses, right? And we have a special course now, the personal finance, but you also have students will still be able to take economics as an elective. That's redundant unless you have a way of beefing up that economics into something different.
So next year is when we'll start looking at our elective offerings. So we still plan on offering AP Economics. Some districts separate those. They offer AP Macro, AP Micro. There are economics standards that we most certainly could, right, really specify, very similar to what you heard in our math pathways, right? Like really, again, to use your words, beef up the economics and make it really specific to that economics, that content area. So I think there is a way to do that, and our economics teachers, who are incredibly passionate about the course, have a lot of ideas about what that would look like. That's the work that we'll tackle next year when we go to look at what those elective offerings will be.
That's all I was asking, I guess.
Yep.
Are you going to take care of that?
Yes.
Your answer is yes.
I will absolutely take care of that, yep. So, did you have a question? Do you want to wait?
Yeah. May I? Thank you. I actually have a few, and I'm just going to be honest. I would need to see more about how the economics standards integrate into the other elements of social studies to be comfortable with removing economics. At face value, I don't like the idea, but I trust that you put a lot of time and energy and thought into this, but I really would like to see kind of how it maps into those classes. I think it's a critically important class. By adding the requirement now for personal finance, which I would support that also, and keeping economics, but by adding that requirement, now we've essentially added a half credit of requirement, right? Because it's really not
You haven't, because it wouldn't switch, it would count towards their already required elect. So students are required 9.5 elective credits, so that would just count towards that requirement.
Understood. But ultimately, we're reducing the number of credits that they actually have discretion over if we're
choose from.
forcing the personal
Correct.
finance.
Yes.
And I think it's a critically important class, as I do economics.
Yes.
And I think, obviously, infusing the economics into the social studies classes is going to happen anyway, so there already should be some redundancy. I also think that's a good thing. But I also could, again, I understand there's new standards, and we're trying to map to those standards. I think economics is one of those classes that we want redundancy in, and I think having it concentrated is really important. I also think having it infused into social studies is critical for contextual understanding of how it applies. So then looking at 10th grade in particular, the forward exam happens when?
In the spring.
In the spring. And I'm guessing it's not the AP kids that we're focused on. Obviously, we have problems with our English language learners. We have certain groups that are struggling more than others. Overall, I think it's something like 40% or so are proficient or above. So the idea is that you would have this year-long continuation of world history that we think is going to make our 10th graders perform better on the forward exam?
I think not only the forward exam, but also, right, we have ACT data, we have Aspire data, we have, I think, again, looking at our team, when we looked at just overarching how our students are performing even on some of the assessments that they give in class. It's the skills that they are learning in a social studies classroom. So those skills I mentioned, like, again, argumentation, the ability to really dig into a complex text. So primary sources, I mean, you don't get much more complex than an authentic primary source. And so the more exposure that we can give students in that ability, in their ability to, right, critically think around that, we think is going to enhance our students' literacy skills, which, again, that we think is going to infuse or impact achievement not only on the forward exam, but also their trajectory in lots of avenues, their ability to perhaps, Mark mentioned a stretch class, feel maybe a little bit more, able to, I'm going to take AP US History next year, right? Or I might perform a little bit better on that ACT that I have to take my junior year. So it's really that idea that the literacy skills that we are seeing in not just forward, but again, our 9th grade spring map data is, right, not that great. Across the board, we think that the literacy skills that a student is daily participating in a social studies classroom is a value add. There's also, and we didn't mention this, but once upon a time, a long time ago, we also worked really hard to align our ELA curriculum to our social studies standards. And there has been conversation as both teams, right, are under curricular revision of what might that look like, how can we continue to support that. That work is really difficult to do when students are in a semester-long world history class. And so that also came up as part of the conversation. And again, it's really just those foundational skills that we think students having a year long to experience versus just a semester will impact them.
I guess I can speak a little bit to your question on the content and how economics content would be worked into the other courses. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on the econ standards and all of them. But when I look at, just from a human geography perspective, the areas of economics that I know are worked into the class are items that go along with trade and trade organizations, development of countries and levels of development matched with sectors of the economy, the impacts of industrialization, and many of those types of things, the impact of gender development on the economy, agricultural development, and so when we look at a world view, we see a lot of analysis of data and impacts that way. that align with many of the things that are taught in economics. Now, all of it, of course not. And I'm not here to argue against economics. I think it's a phenomenal, course that I myself took as an elective when I was in high school, and I support it. Economics does allow you to take all of the economic data and focus just on that, as opposed to having it be one aspect of the whole. But there are many areas that do go into those other courses that I think that you would be pleased to see, if that's the...
Kearney, do you want to speak to world, what that might look like? Or
I don't teach world history.
world, sorry.
U.S.
history. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Same kind of similar thing to what Mark said. A lot of it is interweaved into what we look at throughout U.S. history as you're looking at different eras of our country's development. We absolutely talk about industrialization, impact of trade, world organizations, and all of those things as well. So it definitely is touched on.
Thank you. And maybe just to follow up, and I want to kind of pull back to middle school. So if I look at, like you shared, the MAP test data, the forward exam data, I still struggle a little bit with the literacy blocks and how those pieces come together with social studies. Is there more that we can do formally in 7th and 8th grade that would help prepare our students better for high school social studies?
I think this team would all nod and say yes. I think as a system, right, we're always striving for that continuous improvement at all levels of our organization, right? I think it starts in kindergarten, when it starts in K4, right, when they enter our building. How are we continuing to promote readiness of our students so that each year we're closing the gap? So I think yes, and what that looks like, I think, is still, right, that's the work. How can we continuously look at our data, look at what the plans are that we have in place, look at those, right, at the middle school, those house structures, what is working, what's not working, what might need to switch, but most certainly that's part of the conversation.
And so maybe my question was more of just food for thought. Is 10th grade the time to try to fix some of these issues, or is it really needing to start 3, 4, 8 years sooner?
Sure.
That's a good question.
I guess, is it ever the wrong time to do the right thing? Is kind of one of the things that I would respond to that with. But, also, there's a significant power to having common expectations amongst teachers of similar grade levels, where when I can reference what I know they're doing in their freshman or their sophomore level English classes, and it avoids a significant amount of reteaching, and it opens up so much time for more content. And I think that's a strong and powerful reason to have that alignment. So instead of both the English teacher and I teaching them the structure that this paragraph should be in, they've learned it one time, and now we have extra time to work on the social studies skills as opposed to kind of the reteaching and the redundancy. And because believe it or not, students will pretend like they never learned something before to try to waste time and make you go over things and not admit how smart they are, and we can avoid some of those things.
Yeah.
Now, I know that doesn't answer your question about what we can do in the middle school. I'm not an expert on the middle school, but I know it's power in the high school.
Thank you.
Mr. Como.
Just from a policy perspective, we won't answer this question tonight, but maybe we will toss it over to the policy committee. Really, what we are requiring 4 credits of graduation from social studies. So I'm wondering in our policy 5000 if we really should be changing it to that. And I mean, if we're going to require, and we need to require the personal finance course, I mean.
The personal finance would still count as it, because it would not be taught by our social studies department, it would still count as an elective. So it wouldn't change the social studies requirement. That would still be 3.5 credits.
Okay, so
The personal
Who's
finance.
teaching it?
So we have our business department. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And, okay, fair enough.
And just again, for kind of comparison, when we did look at other districts, when I mentioned that balance, about half of the districts in Waukesha County, again, do not require econ. They require personal finance, and that is taught then, again, in the business department. And then, again, the other half does require econ and doesn't require the personal finance class. So it's really a pretty split mix. There wasn't like a everybody leans here, everybody leans here. But in the districts where it was personal finance is required, it's taught by the business department
Okay,
as part of
thank
that. Yep. So I'm going to move on to, because we still have some more information to share. So I want to just get to then our curricular resources. So the last piece then of again, phase one was the determination that we needed to move forward with looking at some curricular resources. So similar to, again, what we did with our middle school process, we looked at what other school districts are doing, and actually I'm going to move to this slide. So we looked at what other school districts were doing. We looked at what resources best align to the national standards, and from there we brought our team together and started to vet those resources. So we were pitched by the companies. We looked at what we thought would best serve us, and so I'm going to have the team talk to you about what we landed on for our pilots. So Mark's going to take it away with TCI.
You know, I had a joke all queued up about Santa Claus and textbooks, but
You
it's
did?
been, I did, but it's been a while now since you made that comment, and it probably
And these are
would-
public, so don't
would've,
be careful.
But I haven't ever asked Santa for a textbook.
Okay.
Now, when we started piloting textbooks for human geography, we started looking at curriculum. I think I came to the realization that I need to create a textbook, because there is no such thing as like the perfect textbook in my opinion of what we're looking for. And we started to review not only what they offer in paper copy, but what their digital resources look like. And we were very interested in what the accessibility features that they offer were, because let's be fair, we looked at that forward data for a reason in the beginning. And I guess I just want to briefly editorialize in the idea that I frequently hear people say how great of a course advanced placement is, and we need to have more kids taking advanced placement and pushing kids into advanced placement. But when I hear that, I think, if advanced placement is so great for all kids, why shouldn't we make the other courses more like advanced placement? And one of the things that comes along with that is having a solid text for students to interact with that inquiry can be built around. And we have not finished the pilot, but I have reviewed the TCI text a significant amount. And at some point, I'm going to pitch it to Iris and put her on the spot with this a little bit. But the availability of resources in Spanish is of huge concern to me as I teach social studies. It is very important to me that students can access things at different levels of text as well. And TCI does do a very nice job of that, and that's something that I've been impressed with their materials. I find myself using like Google Translate to move texts into Spanish, but that is oftentimes the equivalent of handing my students a poorly written work in English and telling them, model your education after this scholarly writing, and it's poorly done. And I hate the idea that without knowing it, I'm giving students who read best in Spanish this poorly written document to model for them what academic writing looks like. And that is, at this point, my favorite part of the TCI curriculum. And I guess I say curriculum, but I'm focusing on the text right now. The supplementary materials for all of these things, they are what they are. But I want to make sure that I have an accessible text for all of my students as step one for starting to fill those gaps that we witnessed. And I rely on Iris quite a bit here with Spanish language materials, and so I'll ask her to chat about it for a sec.
Yeah, so one of the things that, caught my eye with this TCI was the availability of having the level text and the text available for those students who are English language learners. And as you may or may not know, English language learners develop language at a very different rate all across the board. And depending on when we're getting these students, their proficiency levels vary. Therefore, we should be able to provide text and access to the content where they are and then push them forward. But right now, we have nothing. And we're asking students to learn in a completely different language that they have never been taught in some cases, and to learn new content that they probably have never had access to before in a different language. So this resource actually provides that content in a language they understand, especially if language is not the mode of assessment.
And I think one of the other things, in addition, it's not just the Spanish language resources that go with this. One of the other things that I think we're looking for frequently is there's a balance in a textbook that you want to look for between like the core definition ideas and the examples and what students might find more relevant real-world applications. And so that's another thing that we're still balancing. And Rachel frequently would say something like, if a new teacher who's never taught this course before came, what would they be able to do? And so as we look at these books, one of the things that, again, we're considering is there both the core text and the real-world application? And, again, nothing's perfect, but we've found a lot of that so far in the TCI.
I want to make mention too, you'll see it says human geography only. And Kearney is going to talk a little bit about our next pilot resource. The reason that TCI is being piloted in human geography only is that originally we heard from TCI, we heard from McGraw-Hill, and we heard from Pearson or Savvis, as it's now known as. And TCI was actually voted third. However, when we met with our first company, Savvis, what we learned is that their human geography textbook had not been converted into Spanish. And so the team immediately, I came into the room and they were all like standing, just kind of staring, saying...
I mean, it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't that bad. But they really had this like moment of, are we really going to contemplate using a resource that might not be accessible for a population of students that we just identified is one of our most striving groups? And regardless of whether or not this is a class that we would consider to be a dual language class, regardless of whether or not this is a class that is going to eventually be taught, right, in Spanish, do we want to go down this path? And we looked at each other, we looked at the data, and we said no. And so we went back to the drawing board, met with TCI. They re-pitched us some ideas. We talked to them about what we wanted to see, and that's why we ended up bringing that back. So Kieran is going to talk to you now about Savvis, which is our what we're currently piloting.
Yes, so Savvis offers both world history and U.S. history. I teach U.S. history, so that's the only thing I'll be able to speak to you tonight about. And I have had the opportunity to start playing with some of the resources with my students, so I can go through a little bit more of the specifics on how they interacted with it. From the start, the login process was super simple for them. As we're starting to look at what digital options are available to students, I think we're all kind of realizing that that part's not really going to be a barrier to them. They're all very comfortable with the iPads. They can get places significantly faster than most of us can a lot of the time. So that part went very smoothly, and then we were also able to dive into a portion of the text on the Industrial Revolution, and a really nice thing that I noticed as they were going through the text is that it's very image rich, so there are a lot of images for students to look at that are helpful for sparking discussion, but also to kind of guide them along the reading. It breaks up the text when they're looking at it. As far as breaking up the text goes, there are also little boxes. It's called an interactive notebook, so it'll stop them partway through and ask them a comprehension question, which is really nice. And then on our end, we have access to all of that, and when comprehension is an issue, it's really nice to be able to flip through those responses and see if they actually pulled out of that paragraph what they needed to pull out. And those vary from like text dependent, like kind of point and click questions, to stretch questions, asking them to think about impact of what they were reading on the context of what we're looking at. The other thing that worked very well for them is every page has audio available, and they can slow that audio down or speed it up. Every page also offers a leveled summary to go down if they need to. It's not necessary, but I did see as I was walking around, a lot of students it's a really quick click to look at a quick summary before answering the question, just to make sure they understood it. As we were talking about language accessibility, every chapter also provides a Spanish text summary and a Spanish audio summary, which was also very nice, as we do have students coming from so many different levels. Just because they speak Spanish doesn't mean they can necessarily read Spanish quite as well, so having the opportunity for them to be able to listen to it in their native language was also very helpful. The audio was also helpful for my students with IEPs in classes that didn't have a teacher aide to support reading through everything. They could just pop their headphones in and listen to it, and still have a level of independence while I was able to walk around the room. I did ask at the end of class how students were feeling about it, and a couple of the comments, again, they said the login was easy. They really enjoyed having the audio option and the leveled summaries. And then I asked them how they felt about the text itself. Like, did you feel like it was at level? Was it easy to read? And they said that it was relatively interesting, given that this is a history textbook and this is a chapter on the Industrial Revolution. So they weren't like riveted by it, but they did seem engaged. In addition to doing the text, Savvis also has a lot of really cool interactive like extras, so it's not just looking at the text. They also viewed an interactive image of the Lowell system for the Industrial Revolution, so they were able to like point and click at different points in the image, and it blew parts of it up and then gave them a little bit like a snippet of information, and then after clicking on all of that, they were able to access some questions. Some were multiple choice, and then some again were those stretch questions that they actually had to think about and apply what they learned in the image. And this was just through one lesson. Several other lessons, like when we get to looking at the Gilded Age and some of the issues in housing, there was one lesson that I'm really interested in looking at that allowed students to like move through, almost like Google Maps, through tenement housing. So it does very much, it's called World History and U.S. History Interactive because there is a heavy interactive piece to it, which today I think is very important in keeping students engaged in what they're learning in courses like World History and U.S. History.
So we have not yet moved into, we're piloting one at a time. So the teachers in, again, Human Geography are currently piloting TCI. World and US are currently piloting the Savvis resource. And then once they are done, they'll move into all three courses. We'll move into piloting McGraw-Hill. And so we'll continue to keep you updated on how those pilots are going. And then once we come forward again with what pilot we're going to recommend, we will come forward with more detailed information about, again, what that resource offers. We'll make sure that we bring you all samples, get you access. We are, again, looking at an online version as well as the hard copy, and so we'll get you access to all of those resources. And as you heard, again, the teachers, they're actually coming together tomorrow. What they're doing with the students fits right in with what their current curriculum looks like, and then they come together and work with me intermittently throughout the pilot to dig a little bit deeper, looking at, right, the book as a whole, looking at the resources as a whole, meeting with the representative to find out what other tools and tricks, right, the platform offers. So in terms of next steps, we're going to continue to pilot. Middle school is finishing their first pilot next week. High school is again moving into their first pilot. We're going to collect the same teacher feedback and student feedback that we have with our prior pilots. We're going to look at things like, does it align to the standards? Does it align to our inquiry-based approach? Is it got appropriate readability, age appropriate, and then does it present balanced perspectives, right? We're talking about social studies. Are we making sure that we're presenting a balanced view of history? And then in February, I'll be taking this information to our district curriculum council so that they can, again, our parent committee can give us some feedback on the work that's been happening. And then lastly is in February and March, I'll be back with this team, our middle school team and our high school team, to present you with where we've landed. Thank you for being here, paying attention, and sticking with us. I know this was a long presentation. Appreciate that. Any questions that you still have for our team?
I'm sure that was just a fraction of the work that you've done behind the scenes, so. But you did a nice job summarizing where you are up to this point, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
My experience with, at the elementary level with the forward exam, I always felt that it was more of a reading test than a content test. And I have no idea what it's at the 10th grade level. I've never seen one, but.
So Brett Brett, you were the one who took it, right, in our last meeting?
Yeah, it was pretty difficult.
Brett took one, and yeah, we it's definitely more than a reading test, the social studies part of the exam.
Mm-hmm. So it does actually look at the standards and assess the standards.
Yeah.
Okay.
This will be the first year that it's assessing the new standards.
Right.
So prior to this, yeah.
Right.
So.
And all these new resources that you're looking at align to the standards.
Correct. All of the resources, for the most part, are actually like hot off the press, newly revised as well, which is also.
Right, which is really good timing.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Any further questions? Awesome job, very much appreciate it, and we look forward to having you come back. Also thank those team members that weren't here tonight that are behind the scenes doing the heavy lifting as well. So
they are most certainly doing the heavy lifting.
Thank you so much. I think you're done.
I think I'm done, yes. I'm going to go sit down now. Thank you.
Rachel, can we give you these books back? Or just give them to?
If you leave them just at the end with Stacy, I can
Stacy?
select them.
Okay, sounds good.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up under discussion information items is the Procedural Compliance Self-Assessment PCSA update. We have presenters Patty Havel, Director of Special Education, Jason Gahan, Director of Secondary Special Education, and Amanda Mack, Director of Elementary Special Education. They're looking at the required review process for special education, and it's completed every 5 years in every district, and involves a review of randomly drawn special education evaluations, or IEPs. So they are here tonight to walk us through that process and through my experience with it, how it actually benefits a district instead of can be a negative. So I'll turn it over to the three of you, and thank you for being here tonight to present to us.
Thank you. Thank you. Last time we met with you was back in the spring, and we were telling you about getting ready. So here we are, giving you an update on where we're at. Just a little reminder, the results-driven accountability, procedural compliance self-assessment is one of the 20 indicators that we need to respond to, required by law. And some of those indicators are collected annually, some are every 3 years, some are every 5 years. The PCSA, or the self-audit, is on a 5-year cycle Our last audit was in 2014, 2015. The pandemic year caused a shift, so we've actually gone 6 years before coming around to this new PCSA. We were preparing in the 2019-20 school year. We were doing professional development with our special educators to get ready for the kinds of questions that are in this round of the self-audit. And then we reviewed that for our new teachers during the 2021 school year. We really take this into account frequently throughout every 5-year cycle because we draw IEPs and do our own self-audit. That really does help us feed our professional development for special education every year. So last time we met, we were in the prepare phase, and we are now finished with the assess phase. That means we've gone through all of our reviews and we've submitted all of our information to DPI. Just a reminder that the assessment includes 4 areas of compliance statements. They are in the area of student evaluations, annual IEP questions. New areas are implementation, actually looking at are we delivering the service that's written into the IEP, and then discipline, which looks at compliance across all students with IEPs who may have 10 or more days of disciplinary removal. So on August 5th, we had a team of 17 special educators and administrators who reviewed the evaluation and IEP questions on 62 IEPs. It took us the better part of a day, and they were very diligent. They carefully reviewed and asked questions about the language that was on the questions, and we can tell you about some results. We can say that 25% of those IEPs reviewed passed on all items, and that really is a nice celebration for us. We did inform those case managers and their administrators that these were cases that met all of the expectations. Many of the other IEPs reviewed had one item in error or 2 or 3. It's pretty easy to make an error because one single word can be the factor that gives you an error. And in some cases, when there were more than 3 errors, it simply happened because if you make an error on item number 9, you are automatically going to have errors on several more following questions. So we did take all of this information, communicate with each case manager about that case and their administrator, letting them know these are errors that were found through the audit. We need you to make those revisions. Those are all done. And what was nice for us is that for Summer Institute, where we always hold a special education back to school session, we took the top 5 errors. And we had that information to share with them so we could start making change, improving our practice.
So writing quality IEPs are of course very important, but it's the implementation that's really going to impact our students on a day-to-day basis. So that's the next part of the PCSA, was that implementation review. We set a 2-week window in October where Patty, Jason, and myself were able to go out and examine if those IEPs were actually being delivered as written. And for a new director here, that was actually the most exciting part because I got to go out into the buildings and meet students and see our staff doing great work for our kids. So this was a smaller sample. This was 13 of our cases that were randomly chosen. And again, as you can imagine, a 2-week window to see if they're actually being implemented was quite intense. Great success in this area, which was very exciting. 100% of those IEPs met all implementation criteria. And from our experience talking to other directors, this is really hard to do because you can write a great IEP. It's much harder than to always implement it to a T. So the areas that we were looking at were the specially designed instruction in the IEP, the supplementary aids and services, behavior supports, where progress reports were provided to parents, where testing accommodations provided. So we did things like observations, interviews with students and staff, looking at documentation, And again, that was a really exciting part of this review because we're seeing it in practice. And then the other items that we were looking at were discipline. So 2 indicators. One, do we have a system in place to track disciplinary removals for our students with IEPs? And are we assuring delivery of services if they are removed from school for more than 10 days? And again, really happy to report this is an area we had great success. In fact, we didn't have any children that were suspended for more than 10 days. So all we had to do is let DPI know that we do in fact have a data system in place to track those removals. And in the event we did have a student over 10 days, and again, we didn't from this sample, we do have a process in place to ensure service delivery.
So that brings us to the next step. So we heard about the reviews, identification of corrections that needed to be made, or as Mr. Dietz explained, opportunities for improvement. And now the third stage, as you see in front, is the correct stage, or what are we going to do about some of the mistakes that we've made, and then how do we continue to grow the celebrations that we've discovered as well. So as we flip to the next slide, it starts to highlight what we have done. So the first link there is something that we kicked off, I think it was at the May T&L meeting, what we shared with you, and that was the standards, the directions and standards, or the rubric that we were going to go through student files with. So that's a refresher for you there. The second one that Patty just alluded to is then in preparation for this process, we knew we had all special education teachers, many related service providers, and student service representatives, those who were really at the heart of developing and implementing IEPs. We knew we were going to have them together. At our Welcome Back, our Summer Institute, we always offer a Welcome Back session for that group of individuals. So that's when we decided to identify and take the top 5 errors, because as Patty had indicated, that many of the indicators as you go through IEP and eval and implementation, or yet to be implementation, there were many that had one mistake. And yes, it was either to omit a word or to include a word, or so, it was very sensitive. So we took the top 5 and spent about 30 to 45 minutes of our time together that day doing some discussions, some real examples, some turn and talk, some elbow type, learning from their neighbors that they could then take over into the school year as October came and they started to develop new annual IEPs. On top of that, then, we have an opportunity coming up at the Winter Institute, which is on January 17th. We will have the better part of the morning set aside to really dive into what Patty has on your screen in front of you, and that's what we call either the IEP checklist or the LEA representative checklist. This is something that we have utilized in the past with administrators. This, in our opinion, is much more comprehensive than the standards that we utilize for the PCSA, because it goes through every single page that is required in the IEP, whereas this PCSA likely hit on half of the pages and only certain questions on each page. This is really a dissection of everything that they need to include, to answer, when it comes to writing an IEP for students. So we will spend the better part of a morning digging into this with all special education teachers and many related service providers, I believe, including some student service reps, and we will go through this item by item. In addition to that, then, annually we do a very similar thing with our administrators, and we will be doing that I believe the Friday before Winter Institute with the administrators. So as we then round into second semester, that added training is in place. The importance of that is these corrections will be finalized. We have submitted our assurances, but between January 15th and April 15th is going to be a new round. Once we cleared April 15th, DPI will pull another random sample in that window. So we will have all of our corrective action training or opportunities for growth in that window or before that window enters, right? So that when they pull, then we'll submit those corrections or those samples to them after May 1st. So the timing really worked out well for us. At that point then, if there are corrections that need to be made, we will make those corrections. And the goal is by, I believe it's next October 22nd, is our aim to have this cycle closed out. I did miss up there, we offer annual TDP, it's our teacher development program or classes. Every year we have, I believe, 2 cohorts within the year that run through and take the class on IEP development and best practices. They're about to finish up the first cohort of the year, and then as we clear into the new year, they'll be starting up another one.
Jason, did you say the next round would be a selective sample of IEPs chosen, and then those would be sent to the Department of Public Instruction?
Yes, so
So not an internal review? Would it still be internal review?
No, that's correct.
External
It would be DPI would do the review.
Okay, yep.
In that window of January 15th to April 15th.
Right, but after you've had a chance to identify past areas that needed improvement, as well as an opportunity to implement those, you're then looking at seeing if that's all come together by the external review with DPI.
Right, any IEPs that are new from January to April?
Yes.
We would upload those student IDs to DPI, and then they would randomly select from that. I actually don't know how many they choose.
Sure.
Yeah, but to your point, all of the professional development and opportunities for growth will have taken place before that window opens,
Right.
or actually 2 days into it. So
Right.
before anything is finalized, they will have the opportunity to participate in those.
Nice.
Lastly, the ad hoc committee. When we met in May, I believe we had referenced that as a part of this, we were required to have an ad hoc committee that was slightly different than the committee that actually reviewed student IEPs. It included regular ed teachers, it also included a parent rep. So for obvious reasons, we could not have them go through student IEPs that were confidential in nature. I know it says coming up, we should say slash previously, because last night, yesterday afternoon, we met with the ad hoc committee and gave a very similar presentation, update information for them. And that's something that we needed to take care of as a part of this process as well. What questions do you have for us? Certainly, as we proceed through, as we enter into the summer and the next year, we will give you updates, whether it's through a formal presentation such as this or a weekly board update, depending on how smoothly things go.
Dr. Piazza?
Maybe a simple one. Thank you for all these updates. What is the role of that ad hoc committee? Are they advisory? Are they informational?
It seems just informational. We basically, last spring, shared with them the same presentation we shared with the board, and again, yesterday, we shared with them the same presentation we're sharing with you.
It's also a way to make sure that stakeholders from across different groups are informed of what we're doing. It's a common practice for special education grants that we receive as well, to have that larger stakeholder type meeting.
So these are staff members and then the parent representative?
Correct.
There's administrators, special educators, general educators, and parent representatives. Other questions?
Mr. Baumgart?
Just a comment. It's interesting that this is a rather intense survey, or whatever you want to call it, study. We hear about it every 5 or 6 years. And it's kind of refreshing to realize how much we do well. I mean, we've known we do an awfully good job on this kind of thing anyway, but when you see some of the details and you got a problem 1 here or a problem 2 there, you know, it's reassuring after a number of years of not paying much attention to the numbers to see what you got. And when I guess I didn't just say appreciated much time.
Yeah, our staff takes this really seriously. They get really nervous when it's time to do procedural compliance, because they know that the lens is on their work. And so we're very thoughtful about how we communicate with them about the case that was pulled was yours and you need to make corrections. And we walk them through how to do that and communicate it with parents. So it is a big deal because everything we do in special education has a legal requirement to it, so.
And to Patty's point, we have a common rubric of an IEP that we complete on very individualized learners or individual students, right? So oftentimes it can be difficult to answer questions based off of the student's disability. And our staff put an extraordinary amount of time and attention and detail into completing those individualized plans to assist, our students in accessing their education, supporting them through their emotional or behavioral challenges, focused on advancement through the grades, focused on graduation. So to your point, it is a stressor for our staff, and because they want to do well, they mean to do well, and they don't take mistakes lightly.
I can see that. Thank you.
Is there a portion in the internal review where there's like a peer evaluation? A peer looks at another special education teacher, or a peer looks at another teacher's work? Is
You
that?
mean in our daily practice?
Yes, in your daily practice?
Yeah, we do encourage that. At each building, we have a special education chairperson, one of the special educators
Right, in
is
each
the
building,
lead for
okay.
the building.
Yep.
And we do encourage them to do that for each other, so that they have some sense of some comparison and some better way of using the language and how to document how they're progress monitoring and things like that.
Does, in this district, does the IEP, after it's written by the teacher, is it overviewed by anyone, or does it go directly into implementation? Is it approved by someone?
It goes directly into implementation.
Okay, it's not approved by the building chairperson? Is
No,
it
but-
seen by the building chairperson?
Not typically, but the
Okay.
LEA representative is an administrator from the building, and they participated in the meeting.
Okay, okay.
And to get back to Mr. Baumgart's point before, even though every 5 years you may hear about this, the professional development, the LEA checklist or IEP checklist is a PD that we run every single year.
Oh, yeah.
The IEP best practices TDP class, that's something that is run numerous times every single year. And then to get back to your point, the LEA rep does sign off on it by autographing the placement page.
Right.
And by building their skill and their knowledge on that checklist, or as I say, making them a little bit more dangerous and knowing what to listen for.
Right.
And how to advise and how to assist. That's all part of then taking steps to assure an appropriate and a legally sound document in the end. Many of our secondary schools, their LEA reps also ask the teachers to submit a draft of the IEP ahead of the meeting, so they have a chance to review it and offer feedback, so revisions could be made ahead of time. And then they also have, as you know, some days after the meeting to also seek some assistance or ask some questions and make revisions before then it goes to implementation.
Right. And that is a draft document. I mean, and that was something typically I would give to parents ahead of time too.
Yeah.
Because it's not a good feeling to, as a parent, walk into a meeting with 7 other school people around you, and everyone has knowledge of what's in this plan, but the parent doesn't, and sometimes that requires some think time, some time to process that draft, because it's always in draft form.
Sure.
It can always be revised. So I'm glad to hear that that's happening too, and it's probably one of the best things I've ever seen come from the Department of Public Instruction, because it's really a means of self-improvement, and it's your roadmap for professional development. Sometimes I see a disconnect with Department of Public Instruction, but in this case, in this particular area, I see a direct link to professional development and improvement in the product of IEPs, which in turn would relate to the instruction that's happening in the classroom. So I don't see anything wrong with it. I think it's a great thing, and I'm sure you're, like you said, you're incorporating that stuff annually, not every 5 years. So it's very exciting to see how you do that and the benefits that are gained from it.
Any other questions?
Nice job, everyone. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else? Thank you so much, and then you'll be back later to go over the next phases.
Sure will.
Tell you how.
Have a good night. Thank you very much.
I will come back.
Seems like we always save the best to last.
I like to
Do you
think
get that
so.
feeling, Amy?
I like to think so. All right, let
The
me
closer.
The closer.
The closer.
closer. Well, you're still hanging with me, and I appreciate
Yeah, we
that.
are hanging with you.
So,
So our last discussion information item is key performance indicators, an update on those. That also includes some information on DPI state report cards. So I will turn it over to Amy Riebel, our data communication liaison.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Speaking of things from DPI, I have the school and district report cards that DPI released back on November 16th. So, and you should have all gotten copies of those, as well as a copy of the presentation. So, and you probably noticed, I think I hit a record for the number of slides in one presentation. So apparently that wasn't something I was supposed to be striving for, but nevertheless, here we go. So we've got 6 things that I want to share with you. First of all, just some recent changes to the report cards, because there are some significant changes this year. We'll talk about our district report card. We'll do a brief highlight of the school report cards that each school received, and they have very similar components to the district report card. We'll talk a little bit about the trend data that we see over time for both our district and school report card. And then we'll talk about the report cards in the context of the key performance indicators that you adopted this past fall. It is very easy to get, as those of you who've been around here for a while know, it is very easy to get deep in the weeds in these report cards because they are highly technical and highly complex, and we have a lot of them. So my goal tonight is to stay pretty high level and just do some overview, try not to get too deep into it, but offer you the same opportunity I have in the past. If anyone, I have pages upon pages of resources around these report cards and lots of data to look at. So if anybody really wants to dig into one, I'd be happy to do that further at another time, because there's a lot to learn about these.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, just some background to help get us started as we dig into this. We have had report cards. The first one was, for many years, the first one was issued for the 2011-2012 school year. We have had 2 years where we did not have report cards. For the 2014-2015 school year, as they were making some changes, and then for the 2019-2020 school year, as we did not have state assessments, that was the year we, of course, all moved to home work and home learning at that point. There have been multiple changes made to the report cards over the years. So DPI does always caution us to be cautious about looking at one year, comparing one year to another, because there have been some tweaks and some major changes over those years. And you can find all of those report cards on the DPI website. If you Google DPI report cards, it'll take you right there. So first of all, just the updates for this new report card. You can see, first of all, there have been some significant visual design changes. The new report card is on the left and the previous report card is on the right. They have tried to make it easier to read and easier to understand with more visuals and graphs than just straight numbers. So that is one change off the top. They also issued a statement of caution on each report card this year, just given the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, and we talked about this last month with the assessment results. Just we need to be aware of who was tested, how many students were tested compared to previous years. So that's that caution on all report cards. As you may remember, and we'll talk about this more as we go through, there are 4 priority areas that are scored and make up the overall school report card score. One of the priority areas previously was called the closing gaps area, and over time they found some challenges with the calculations in that area, and so they've removed that this year and created something called the target group outcome priority area, where it's still getting at the same point where we're looking at our students who are underperforming and helping kind of focus attention on them while trying to grow all students. So this, and we'll talk about a little more later, this target group identifies the students who scored in the bottom quartile, essentially the bottom 25%, in the 18-19 school year state assessments, creates them as a target group, and then looks at their performance most recently and compares their performance in various areas to students who are not in the target group. So just a new kind of calculation for us to look at. And again, we'll talk about that a little more as we go through. DPI for the first time also offered an opportunity for each school and district to write a narrative statement to put on the front. So it gave us an opportunity to tell a little bit more about our school, a little more complete picture. It was a very limited character count. So Jody Landish and I spent, each school got to do their own, and then we had to do some further editing to get it to fit in the space. But it was a good opportunity, and I think that will continue, and hopefully with a little more room for narrative. DPI also took away any further deductions. So you may recall that in previous years there were times when schools had a 5-point deduction taken from their overall score, either because of the dropout rate, the rate of absenteeism, or the rate of students, the number of students who were tested. Those deductions have all gone away. So the test participation deduction had gone away a while ago, but the dropout and absenteeism rate deductions have now gone away. So we will not have any more 5 points taken off the top kind of thing. And the absenteeism data is incorporated in the on-track priority area, as well as that target group priority area I just talked about. And then the graduation rate is talked about in on-track as well.
Amy, was there one for expulsions as well? A deduction for expulsions?
There may have been a ways back, but not in recent years. Not in my time anyway.
That always affected our graduation rate, the expulsion on the school report card.
Okay, because to me, I always looked at that as, okay, you're expelling kids, but you're getting dinged for it when you, I mean, there's a reason why kids are expelled.
Right.
But at the same time, it's affecting your report card in a negative way.
Correct.
So, you know.
Exclusionary discipline in general had an impact on attendance, and that attendance then would hit you on this school report card or on test participation.
Sure.
You know, when the test participation question was there too.
Right.
Yeah. So it's been a while since it's called up specifically, but you're right.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, Dr. Cook.
Do impact that. The other new piece for the report cards this year, for both our district report card as well as our high school report card, is the addition of some course and program data. And this was required by state statute beginning this year. It does not impact any scores or calculations. It is just information only. And it's the last 2 pages of each high school and our district report card, and it talks about courses related to post-secondary preparation, like AP courses, dual credit, and also arts courses. So, and I'll talk about the specifics of our data when we get to it, but that was a new addition this year as well. So we've talked about this data before, but just as a reminder, looking at the report cards is much different than looking at just 1 year of data. We're looking at multiple years, multiple assessments, and so it does make it a more well-rounded reflection of school performance. So for this report card, we include data from 17-18, 2018-2019, and of course 2020-2021, and multiple assessments across multiple grades. And this data we've looked at before, but all of that is incorporated into different calculations. And furthering the validity of this measure compared to maybe looking at things individually, we also include, as we mentioned before, graduation rate, attendance rate, or what they're calling now the rate of chronic absenteeism. And a student is considered chronically absent when they've missed more than 10% of the school days. The course data, which I just mentioned, scores are impacted by looking at percent of students who are economically disadvantaged, and we'll talk about how that's incorporated, and then multiple student demographics. So this is a more well-rounded piece of data because there are multiple components included. So with that background, we'll take a look at this year's district report card. And I've got some screenshots here and just some things that, again, you've had a chance to look at this, but some different pieces that I want to make sure that you know. The district demographics toward the top of the district report card page look pretty similar to what we've talked about before, with one difference. And our overall enrollment number here is lower than we typically would expect for last school year. And that's because there are two schools whose report cards don't figure into our district report card. So eAchieve Academy and eAchieve Elementary, while they get their own report card, their data does not figure into our district report card because more than 50% of their students are open enrolled. So if more than 50% of their students come from outside our district, their report card does not, their data does not figure into our report card. So when you're looking at calculations, just remember there are two schools not included.
Amy? Yeah. The, excuse me, the percent open enrollment, 2.1%, that's incoming?
Mm-hmm. I believe so, yes. So, yeah.
Has that been
So that's
number?
overall
That's been
district.
up there for some time?
At
I
two-
mean, has that been?
Included?
In previous years?
Yes.
I guess I never noticed it.
Yeah.
So, is that,
It's been pretty stable.
okay.
My recollection, again, it's been 2 years since we've had this, but I believe it's been pretty stable. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, this number is stable, and again, this does not factor in eAchieve.
Right.
When you factor eAchieve in, you're looking at another 1,000 to 1,200 students in the open enroll then, so.
This would include our other charters.
This is just the brick and mortar, 2.1% of our kids come from out of the district.
So also at the top of our district report card, of course, is our overall score. And our score this year was a 70.4, which fell this year into the exceeds expectations category. And that score is a combination of the scores we received for the 4 priority areas, which are achievement, growth, that target group outcome I mentioned, and the on track to graduation component. And those scores don't factor in equally. You probably remember that for the last few years, the report card has had some variable weighting based on the percentage of students receiving free and reduced lunch, or what we consider students who are economically disadvantaged. The more students you have falling into that category, the more weight is going to be given to the growth score, and the less weight given to the achievement score. So DPI has a calculator that they post on their website in which you can identify the components that impact you. So an elementary school isn't going to have a graduation rate, for example, so that's not going to figure into their calculations. A high school isn't going to have a 3rd grade English language arts score, so that doesn't figure into their calculations. And then you identify your percentage of students who are considered economically disadvantaged, and it will let you know what percentage your growth score will count for, what percentage your achievement score will count for, et cetera. So that does vary by school and by district each year, depending on how much movement there is with your percentage of economically disadvantaged.
Amy, how do we identify students economically disadvantaged?
So there are a couple different ways. There are some students, we get information from the state through direct certification that business office know those students automatically qualify for free and reduced lunch based on other factors. And then parents can complete a form to qualify for free and reduced lunch, and then those are processed through the business office.
Okay.
So then here are, and it's I'm sure a little bit difficult to read, but these are our 4 priority areas and how we scored. So we get a score for achievement, which last year was 61.1, score for growth, which was 68.9, the target group outcome score, which was 65.8, and then an on track to graduation score, which was 85.2. And to the right of each of those scores, it shows how those scores what sub areas contribute to each of the priority scores. So for achievement and growth, there is an English language arts score and a math score, and those are based on state assessment results. The target group outcome has an achievement score, a growth score, a chronic absenteeism score, and a graduation score. And on track to graduation has a chronic absenteeism score, a graduation score, a third grade ELA score, and an 8th grade math score. And I'll talk about all those as we get a little further. They also visually compare us to other K-12 districts across the state, so you can see kind of a comparison. That comparison doesn't figure into the calculations, but it's kind of a visual to see where we compare, where we're ahead and where we maybe are lagging a bit. So digging into each of these achievement areas just briefly, and again, these really mirror what you'll see on the school report cards. The components are the same. They look at, for achievement, look at 3 years of achievement data. Bless you. They give us points for a point for every student who scores in a proficient category. We get a 1.5 points for a student if they score in the advanced category, and 0.5 point if they score in the basic category. And then they perform those calculations for those for 3 years worth of data, weighting the most recent year most heavily, so that counts the most, and then come up with both an ELA score and a math score. So you can see our ELA score was 61.6 and our math score was 60.6. Coming up with a final total of 61.1. And again, they compared us to other districts across the state, and our score was the same or higher than 41.8% of the districts. The second priority area is growth. And I'll talk in a minute how that's calculated because that is a little more complex. But our growth score was 68.9, which put us in the top half of districts in growth across the state. Our ELA's English Language Arts score was a 71.7, so it was more than a 1.5 points higher than our math score. So overall, we had more growth in English Language Arts last year than we did in math. The growth calculation is figured on a value-added model, which is a highly complex calculation. But the idea of it is really pretty simple. They're really comparing the difference between actual and predicted growth over time for students with similar assessment histories and similar personal characteristics. So they're trying to do an apples-to-apples comparison, removing any barrier or anything that would that's beyond our control. So a disability status, poverty status, language proficiency status, that kind of thing, to just look at, did students make as much growth as other students who are similar, or did they make more, or did they make less? And so here's an example of 2 students. The one on the left, you can see the dark green triangle was their score from 2019. So actually they're looking at 2 years ago because we didn't have any assessments last year. And this student's actual score is above the light green triangle, which was the predicted score. So that student made more growth, or there was perceived in a value add. On the right side, the student did not meet the projected growth. So that's really what they're looking at. But it's a, again, highly complex calculation that they then convert to a 0 to 6 scale and give us this graphic. And so 3 is average growth. Anything on these charts, and I know you can't read that, but it's enough just to see the idea here that ELA is on the left, math is on the right. The line on the left next to ELA, that is average growth. Any number in the blue to the right of the line is more than average growth for that particular group of students. And they've got a whole list of categories of students. So you can see that our students made average growth or more than average growth in every demographic group in English language arts last year. On the right side is math. Anything again in blue is at average or above. Anything in white or just outlined there in blue, not colored in, is less than average growth. But the typical scores across the state are between 2.0 and 4.0. So we're well within the average range, or slightly above. People deep in thought, so I'll pause for a moment. Do you have a question? You're good? Okay.
Nope, I'm good.
All right, so the third
Actually, I
priority.
was just thinking that I really like the growth priority area.
It is one of the graphs that when I,
Not due to our scores, but I think
it's usable.
what it's trying to show.
Yeah. And it is very usable for when I talk with teachers or principals, I get that. Like, it's, for as complicated a calculation as it is a good, clear measure at the end of the day. So here is the third priority area, which is the newest area, the target group outcomes. And again, it's designed to focus on the learners who need the most support while continuing to improve the outcomes for all kids. So it creates a bit of a mini report card based on this bottom quartile that they've identified. And so our overall score was a 65.8, which put us the same or higher than 60.2% of the districts across the state. So well on the top half of performance across the state. And those component scores underneath the growth or the target group overall score, they look, again, they started with that target group that they identified from the 18-19 results, and they then compared their present, most recent scores. And they compare for, in each category, students in the target group compared to students not in the target group. So you can still see where that gap might be. On the achievement side, there's definitely a gap. On the growth side, interestingly, our students who were in the target group, on average, made more growth than the students in the non-target group. Toward the bottom is that chronic absenteeism. So our target group had a higher rate of absenteeism than our non-target group. And our graduation for our target group was slightly less than, just over 10 points less than the overall graduation rate of the non-target group. So work to do, for sure, but these are the students identified as being the students who need the most support. So overall, some positives to see there.
Amy, are the students in the target group known in the district?
They are.
Like access, administrators, teachers would have access to those students.
They do. So this is a new measure for us. So one of the things that happened with this new measure, and of course not having a year with no assessments, is we do get a list of who's in your target group. Most of those students, unfortunately, have left the school where they were tested at. At the same time, though, they are still known. They are, when we talk about identifying our students who are testing in the bottom quartile for MAP, and there's a similar pattern, and so schools have already identified most, if not all, of those students through that process.
Sure.
So they definitely did take a look at those lists. We continue to kind of take a look at those lists. The plan is for DPI to make this much more usable for us. There's supposed to be a dashboard coming out where schools can see who's in your target group in anticipation of the next year. So there'll be just another way to look at that that'll make it a little bit easier. So this is definitely the area that we're all still learning about, as it's brand new, and these just, we got the final updated lists, I think, the 12th of November. So it's still a learning process for us, but yes.
I'm still struggling with, you mentioned it, but a target group on growth, English, language arts, and mathematics. The target group exceeded the non-target group, right?
They did.
What did I miss there?
So those kids, the kids most in need of support, made more growth on their state assessments
Well,
than,
it was growth, that's right. It's
Yeah, they made more
It wasn't head-on certain grades, okay, thank you.
correct, yep.
Based on growth, yeah.
Yep.
Obviously, that says right on top.
So the final priority area is on track to graduation and identifies how successfully students are doing compared to identified components, important components of a K-12 education. So we had a high priority score in this area of an 85.2. Other districts in the state also had a high score because we were scored as well or better than 33.2% of them. So there were some high scores here. But not every district in the state has all of these components. We have K-8 districts in the state, we have 9-12 districts in the state, so their weighting might be different than ours depending on the components they have. So something to think about there. The key pieces identified in this category: chronic absenteeism, again, graduation rate, and this is looking at it not for the target group, but for all students now. So, and then performance in third grade English language arts and performance in 8th grade math. And that's achievement performance in those two areas. So we had some strong scores comparatively to the state there. So the final component of the district and state report cards that I mentioned that was new this year, the last 2 pages, are those post-secondary and arts course data. And again, this was required for the first time. This data goes to DPI from our student information system, so there's a syncing process of transferring that data. And we noticed when we transferred that data last year, it didn't transfer completely. And we weren't the only district that had this problem. But when we got our report cards, we're like, not all this is accurate. And so when you are looking at North and South's report cards in particular, you will notice that their post-secondary course data and their arts data is not complete. Again, we weren't the only district that had this problem, but it meant that our district report card isn't accurate for those 2 pages. It's just those 2 pages. And then the state average can't be correct because I know we weren't the only district that had this problem. So we did work with DPI. They were very clear from the outset that they were not going to correct any of that data. This year they were recognized that there were errors in that data. It's for us to learn from and to know what to watch for in our data syncing process this year. And we would all know better and do better next year. So it's unfortunate, but just be aware that that data has has quite a few inaccuracies in the case of North and South. And know that we are watching that data closely as the snapshot was taken today, and so I've been looking at it very carefully, and I think it went through all fine. So it should be a 1-year problem, but just wanted you to know that. The other piece I should mention is we're going into school data, is that for that post-secondary data, when we're looking at the academies, for example, our 2 academies at South will always have 0 AP course participation, for example, because their courses are attributed to South. So that participation will show up at South and not at the academies. So just know that's a little hiccup in that data process as well. All right, when we jump into school report cards, we will talk about history. Again, we want to use some caution in comparing, but we do see some patterns from year to year. So up at the top left, that's the 2015-16 district report card, and that score. To the top right is the 2016-17 score. And then at the bottom left, 2017-18. In the middle is 2018-19, which was the last report card we had of that type. And then far right is this year's report card, where they have done away with the cute outline of the state of Wisconsin, and we have just the circle, but there it is. So, so we moved up a category this year, which we will take, and that's our history. Any questions about district report cards?
So the district this year exceeds expectations, which is a smaller number than some of the other years. Did they redefine the schedule?
They redefined it with the new report card.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Did we as a district in the past have this 5-point absenteeism, chronic absenteeism reduction? Not at the district level? Only specific schools?
Yeah. My recollection is that hasn't impacted us for a couple of years, but don't quote me on that. It's been a while. So school report cards, again, we have a lot of them. There's a lot of data. So to simplify things, just want to talk about overall categories and then overall scores. So we had 5 schools in the significantly exceeding expectations category, and their scores are listed there. Keep in mind that Waukesha STEM Academy is chartered as one school, so Randall campus and Saratoga get the same one report card. We had 5 schools in the exceeding expectations category. We have 10 schools meeting expectations. We had 2 schools in the meets few expectations category, and no one in the fails to meet expectations category. We do have 5 schools or programs that receive an alternate report card, because in most of those cases they don't have enough state assessment data in order to develop a report card. And so DPI sends each principal an accountability form to complete, and I work with them to look at what state assessment data we do have, as well as other local data sources. And we make a determination that either this, and we also look at the school goals that they set and whether they met those. And we make a determination whether the school meets satisfactory progress or they need improvement. And so Hawthorne Elementary, being a new school, when we closed Blair and then reopened Hawthorne with a new code, they eventually will have enough data for their own school report card, but they don't have enough years yet. Riverview, of course, is the jail. And then Waukesha East, the Transition Academy is our program at White Rock for our students 18 to 21. And then White Rock, that is our group of students who are in our partnership with Montessori. So we don't have enough years of data for them to have a report card yet, but eventually I think we will. So those are our alternate accountability folks.
Amy, at one time I think the Riverview school data was all reflected in the school district of Waukesha.
Yeah,
instead of
it was in a school,
instead
yes.
of districts where the students were coming from. And has that been corrected?
Well, they still are reflected in our data, but there have not been enough students in that. We have not tested any students in that school for a few years because they haven't been there long enough. So we haven't generated any scores recently.
And the scores at Riverview used to be applied to North High School and Butler Middle School just based off of the ages of the kids who were at the juvenile center. So
Yeah.
Right.
So by creating their own school, their scores would be there. But again, we haven't had any for a few years. So the turnover there has been, students aren't there very long in most cases now, so.
And this will just be reflective of high school kids now, adult age that would be held at jail because the juvenile services were transitioned to West Bend. Waukesha County doesn't have the juvenile program anymore.
Okay. And then I thought you said something about eAchieve that, what was it?
They get a report card, but they don't, their their scores don't impact our report card as a district.
Because of,
their percent of open enrollment. Most
is
of the-
more than,
half come from other districts
Okay.
to us.
okay,
That was a rule that was created
okay.
a handful of years ago now.
Okay,
So,
makes sense.
yeah.
Hmm.
But I forget it every time, so that's why I keep telling you.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, certainly. One other thing that I noticed as I was analyzing this that I thought would be interesting, was interesting to me, I thought might be interesting to you, that we are split down the middle of schools of whose growth is weighted more and whose achievement is weighted more on their report card based on their percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged. So, just thought it would be interesting to note that.
How are you defining as weighted more?
Pardon?
How are you defining it as weighted more?
So if more than the typical 25%.
Oh.
Yeah, so growth might be, at Banting, might be weighted 40% compared to achievement, which would then be weighted 10%.
Okay.
That's just an example, but because they have more students receiving free and reduced lunch.
Right.
So growth becomes the priority.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. So we have half having achievement weighted more and half growth weighted more. So. We also, if you look through those school report cards, may have noticed that we had 4 schools that didn't have a target group score. And I won't get into all of the elements and the business rules that led to that, but they didn't have enough students that tested in the 2018-19 school year and also tested in the 2021 school year to create that target group and measure them in the new year. So, just if you notice that, which meant then that whatever was weighted more, growth or achievement, got that additional 25% as well, which meant that your growth or your achievement for those schools was heavily weighted in their calculations. So.
That's where they show up.
So, just some brief historical perspective. Well, again, report cards have changed over time. I did take a look at how schools have performed historically over the last 5 report cards, and I did come up with some patterns that I thought might be helpful to see. So for the last 5 report cards, we have 3 schools that have consistently scored significantly exceeds expectations. And those are listed there. We also have 4 that have consistently been in significantly exceeds or exceeds. They may have moved around a little bit, but they've stayed in one of those 2 top categories. We have 7 schools that have consistently at least met expectations. They may have been anywhere in those top 3 categories, but they have always met expectations. We only have 1 school that hasn't made it to that meet expectations category, excuse me, that's incorrect. They've consistently met few expectations, but only 1. And then we have 3 kind of sets of schools that have improved their scores over time. So we have 4 schools that at some point in the past 5 report cards had scored they meet few expectations, but are now meeting expectations. And those 4 schools have been in meets expectations more than just this year. This is not the first time they've hit that category. So, but they've shown some growth. eAchieve Academy at one point had scored fails to meet expectations, had moved to meets few, and now for the first time is at meets expectations this year. And eAchieve Elementary had previously scored in the fails to meet expectations, and now they have moved up to meets few expectations. Again, growth.
How long has elementary been in existence?
They had a report card back in, let's see. That's a good test of my knowledge, Bill. Let's see. They had a report card all the way back in 2013, so it was before that. Like,
Did they go to 6th grade?
oh, I'm sorry, 15. 15.
That doesn't sound right.
15, 16 was their first report card. Time is flying.
Remember, we had just a couple classes for a while, right? So we graduated in.
Yeah.
We didn't have all the grades. We graduated it in over time.
Where do they count 6th and 7th grades?
eAchieve Academy.
No, all schools.
All.
Oh, they'd be in our middle schools, okay.
Yeah.
eAchieve, where do they count them?
6th grade and 7th grade count for eAchieve Academy.
The academy?
Yeah.
The elementary. Okay.
6 through 12, yeah.
That's clear now, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So when you adopted the key performance indicators this fall, you adopted 2 that specifically relate to report cards. So I want to report out on those 2. The first one was the percentage of schools who score at the meets expectations level or higher on the DPI state report card. So I took all of the schools, whether they had a regular report card or an alternate report card that was had satisfactory progress, and we have 85% of our schools at meets expectations or higher. So for this year, so that's kind of our new benchmark for that key performance indicator. The other key performance indicator was our overall key performance goal. Waukesha will earn the #1 highest rating on the DPI district report card when ranked against the 10 largest school districts. Previously, when we wrote that goal, we were at #3. After this set of report cards, we are at #2, just passing Madison. Just 70.4 and 1 point away from Appleton. So that's where we are. Excited to be moving up that chart. So again, there are pages and pages of resources around this at DPI Accountability Resources. You can find all of those things. So you can do all of your fun calculations, or you can give me a call or stop by. So we can talk further. That is a high level overview, and a fast one at that. Whenever I'm here, I talk briefly about action steps. What are we doing with all of this? Well, the report card contains things that we've already talked about. So everything that I've already talked about previously obviously applies to this. But I think there are 3 things that continue to happen. Obviously, schools review their report cards with their SAIL team and their staff, and we continue to learn about report card changes. That's just going to be continued learning. Principals do communicate the report card with their school community. Many of them have already done that. If they haven't, they will do it this month, either through a newsletter or a special letter. And then we continue to monitor both results, but also that data transmission that I talked about, and just continuing to reduce data errors. It's a very human process of entering all that data and checking it to make sure it's correct, and even uploading it to DPI. So again, they took that snapshot today and all looked good. So that data that they captured today will impact next year's report cards. So it's always an ongoing process. Any other questions?
How many slides was that?
This is 41, a new record.
Ms. Roddy?
Thank you, Amy. Your action steps, the first one states that the school reviews report cards and shares it with its SAIL team and staff. If we go a few slides back to the historical perspective and look at the schools that have improved their scores, I'm sure those teams have looked at what they've done. Understanding that each school community has its own things going on, how these schools that have improved, what they've done to help improve, how is that shared to the other schools? Best practices type I guess?
Yeah, I think it's shared in a couple of different ways. I think, principals talk informally. We share strategies at principals meetings. The coaches, instructional coaches at each school meet regularly and talk about practices. So I think there are a few opportunities throughout the year to really look at what's happening and what's working. Our elementaries in particular are highly collaborative. Our high schools are as well, but each, high school is a slightly bigger organization. So I think also the curriculum pieces that you hear here contribute to that as well. So,
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Dr. Piazzi.
Thank you. I think you strategically put this at the end, so we're all kind of out of gas here.
I had nothing to do with these.
Maybe it's Jody's fault. As I think many of my colleagues here, I've poured over these things, really trying to understand them, trying to understand the equations. Obviously, a lot has changed in the system this year and the way the scoring is factored in. I like that growth is taken into consideration. I don't like at all that the rankings, the score levels have changed, because I think that throws everything off for everybody. And I think every one of us at first glance has said like, oh, well, we made the scales 5 points easier. I can point to 6 schools whose scores went down by more than 5 points, and 3 of them, their ratings went up. So I don't know what to make of this information. So I just have to look objectively back to, the 3rd grade literacy, the 8th grade mathematics, and there's good stuff in here. So I don't mean to, I'm coming at this trying to be brief here, but we should be concerned about the achievement pieces. We should be trying to better understand how we address that. Obviously, again, there's so many factors considered in here. Every school is going to have to do their own deep dive and understand this. And so I'm happy to see that as a district, we have some nice words around the performance, but I can't make a lot of sense out of the numbers. And I hate to say it, but I'm not turning cartwheels over how our students are doing overall. I think we've always got room for improvement, and if anything, it's the achievement stuff that sticks out at me. I've said this before, but we may be doing better in some cases than other districts, but collectively as a state, we're all not. I'll say it differently. There's just so much room for improvement in terms of student outcomes. So, but I do like the growth piece, and I think year over year, if we stick with this, it might be helpful.
Right.
But coming at it this year with these new scales and these new calculations, unfortunately with a year off and with COVID and all the hybrid and virtual stuff, I actually think that DPI couldn't have done the districts more of a disservice by changing the scale this year than they did, to be honest, because we have nothing to compare it to. It's unfortunate.
So in many of these changes, I can't speak for the scale itself, but many of the changes were planned before COVID. I mean, in fact, the day that everything kind of changed, the last thing I did was sit in on a meeting in the Dells on report cards. So many of the changes were planned for last year and then didn't happen. So, I think collectively we fully believe that there is always continued work to be done. So I think.
Do we have the ability to use the 2019 formulas to calculate our own score based on prior years?
We would have some pieces, but because of the complexity of those calculations, I have to do some research on that.
That would have been helpful, to have the old model and the new model.
Not sure we have that option. But I can look into it.
Thank you. And thank you. Obviously it's not your fault. So
No,
it just makes it really, really difficult to make any sense out of this.
Yeah.
Amy, you did a great job of, I think, presenting and compiling the information in a way that I think made sense to me. And I know that the volume of changes, information coming at you all the time is difficult, but I think you did a great job of summarizing all that. And so many times I've questioned Department of Public Instruction and why it takes so long to get results. Just from the snapshot I've seen, I can see why, and I'm sure you could tell me why too if we met sometime to further give me information on that, because there's just so much information.
Yeah.
And at times I wish there was less. I think it'd be easier to really dive into and make more sense out of, or
In some cases, I think we get more bang for our buck in looking at the individual components. I mean, schools have long
Right.
analyzed their forward data and looked at their graduation data in those pieces.
Right.
And putting it together, I think, does help the public, but it is on an overview level. But there's a lot that goes into it. It's highly complex at that.
Right.
For the overall report card.
But I do like, and I like the change in how how it's being presented compared to just a picture of the state and the number, because that's all anyone ever did is focus on the number. And it's not apples and apples anywhere.
Right. But I have heard people say it is easier to read now and a little bit easier to understand.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
for sure.
Anything else on testing from Amy? Do you know when you're coming back?
Not in January. Maybe not in February. So it might be a while.
Oh, come
I know
on.
you're sad, but
Come on.
if I can come up with something, I'll be back.
Well, we might come up with something. Okay.
Do without our clothes.
Yeah, you'll have to find another closer for a couple of months.
Thank you, Amy. Yep. Okay, we're under other business on our agenda, recommendations for future committee meetings from anyone. Going, gone. I just want to thank you, everyone, for your involvement and participation tonight, especially the crew that's in the back there. Thank you very much. Sometimes we don't hear directly from you, but there can be a topic or a case that we would need your expertise on, and we value and appreciate you attending these meetings as you so frequently do, and are there if needed. So just because you didn't speak tonight doesn't mean you're not needed. So keep up the good work on your part. The next Teaching and Learning Committee meeting will be held on Tuesday, January 4th, 2022, at 6 p.m. here in the boardroom. And with that, our meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone, and happy holidays, however you spend it. Thank you.